Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
All right, here we go. Let's go. Bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Today is Wednesday, December 17th. Yeah. 351 days into the new year, 14 days left. Man, Christmas. In a week? Live from the truthfunders.com studios right here in Burbank, California. Truth Funders, the number one crowdfunding platform for paranormal films, research, expeditions, and inventions of the unknown. Truthfunders.com, proud sponsor right here at Fade to Black. For KJCR on the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your so humble host, Jimmy Church. How is everybody doing tonight? Welcome to everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, North Korea. Man, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, north and south, east and west, up and down, near and far. Welcome. This is Fade to Black. It is the season, the holidays. Big proud salute to the men and women in uniform out there getting it done. Podcast doing good. Hey, actually, we have a problem with the podcast. Might be hacked. Working on it. I'm not kidding. Hackers. Faders.org. Have you guys been there? Hey, we've been busy, the staff here, the last couple of weekends. But this Saturday, don't forget, Fader Cinema. Happy birthday to Barrett Owens. Happy birthday, brother. And Sunday, that's right, it's Allison's birthday. Did I just let the cat out of the bag? Allison, 29 years old. Happy birthday, Allison. Do everything that I would do. You too, Barrett. Just don't get arrested. All right, it's the best way to do it. Let's get this show cracking. We got a lot to do tonight. Follow us on Twitter. Twitter's already gone nuts. Did a little hanging out today. In Twitter. Wow. Man, I love me, my Twitters. All right. At J Church Radio is what you want to do. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Come hang out with us. We got a lot to do tonight. Peter Robbins will be joining us. Rendlesham. I'm telling you, I just tweeted this earlier. I'm pissed. I'm just angry. Just, oh, man. The truth is out there. And I'm the guy. I'm the guy to get her done. Just getting more and more angry as days go by. Something ain't quite right in that Rendlesham forest. But with that, I've got a lot to get out of the way tonight. It is our anniversary week. We're welcoming back our good friend Peter Robbins. I know everybody heard the Colonel Halt's interview conversation last night. I got an email all day today about it. And then, of course, we followed up with John Burroughs with a Jason Martell sandwich in the middle. Thank you, Jason, for calling in last night. That was great. And a couple of more surprises tonight. So it's going to be a great show. Buckle in. Phone the neighbors. Wake the kids. Let's get this show cracking. Today, Bad Company frontman Paul Rogers, 65 years old, voice of an angel. The president, that's right, the president today, actor Bill Pullman, 61 years old. Actor Giovanni Ribisi is 40. How do you make the cut? Giovanni has. Love Giovanni. And also, one of my all-time favorites today, one of my all-time, going back to the beginning of everything, actor, comedian, Eugene Levy, 68 years old. Love my Eugene. Remember Club Paradise? That's what I'm talking about. MMA OG Chuck Liddell is 45. I met Chuck once. He ain't that big. Either that or I'm just huge. Manny Pacquiao today is 36. Actress Mia Jovovich, 39 years old. How do you make the cut? How do you make the cut? You know how she made the cut. You know how she made the cut. Our dead guy's birthday's today. Actor, man, what is wrong with my eyeballs? Singer, frontman, Eddie Kendricks. Born in 1939, died in 1992. Co-founder of The Temptations, The Temps, who sang lead vocals on Just My Imagination. Eddie Kendricks. In 1991, check this out, he underwent surgery to have one of his lungs removed. And then, dude is a singer for The Temps, has one of his lungs removed and then goes back out on tour. That's right. And then, 1992, got sick again, hospitalized, died of lung cancer, Birmingham, October 5th, 1992, at the age of 52. Eddie Kendricks, our dead guy's birthday today. Aren't you glad you come here? You learn something. You learn. You're already smart. Yeah. So, for Twitter, oh, look at that. Space Boy, you got to come follow us on Twitter right now, at JChurch Radio. That's what you want to do. If you can hear my voice, go do it. And hashtag DM RadioNet. Check out what Space Boy just posted. Let me blow that baby up. That's what I'm talking about. Most people out there don't even know what that is. Thanks, Space Boy. Twitter, let's light it up right now. I've got so much. Today is one of those crazy news days. They come along like this once in a while. Today, of course, Cuba, amazing day. North Korea and Sony going at it. I'll get to all of that in just a second. So I didn't know what I wanted to do with Twitter, but you know what? I thought about this. This is a good Twitter question. So let's light it up right now. What was Bill Pullman's better movie? Independence Day or Lake Placid? Now, the reason why I posed the question is it's not the movie, it's which one is Bill's better movie. Independence Day or Lake Placid? I'm going to find out. I'm going to see where the Fadernauts are at. Independence Day or Lake Placid? And you understand the question. The better movie? Well, you know what? As far as movies go, that's a coin toss. Independence Day is great. Lake Placid, phenomenal. So what was Bill's better movie? See, Donna Colvin. Donna, I like where your heart is at. She says Lake Placid. I didn't ask what was Betty's best movie. All right. Follow us on Twitter at JChurch Radio, Facebook, YouTube. Everything's Fade to Black, JChurch Radio, Jimmy Church Radio. That's it. That's what's in there. Fade to Black. Go check it out. Tonight we have author and researcher Peter Robbins. It was a pretty amazing show that we had last night. It was pretty revealing. And the reason why I left tonight's announcement with Peter done until today is because I wanted to make sure Halt came on this show last night. That's why. Okay? And I'm going to get to the bottom of Rendlesham. And you all know that. There's so much there. But anyway, tonight, Peter Robbins will be joining us. Tomorrow, live in the studio, our big anniversary show, Steve Murillo and Alex Mistretta will be joining us live in the studio. And with a singer. The singer's going to come in. I'm going to check that out. You're not going to believe it. It's going to be cool. Going to be real cool. I got so much to cover tonight. Let's just move through all of this. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm sure Peter will take some phone calls. We got a lot to talk about tonight. But if we do, we get some time, we'll do that in the third segment, 323-825-5045. Write that down, 323-825-5045. You want to email throughout the show, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com is what you want to do. You can go over to the website, go to the contact page, and you can also email us there where we use non-NSA specially encrypted servers, and I do mean that. All right? Facebook, this was posted today from Leonard, and check this out. He says, so I know you have a fascination with Slender Man, and many people just say it's nothing more than a creepy pasta story, but did you know it actually has its roots in Japanese folklore? And it's far creepier than Slender Man. The Nopera Bow is a faceless entity that will impersonate your family member, loved one, or just some random person. You will talk to it, and once you drop your guard and get comfortable, it will show its true self and remove its face, leaving nothing more than a smooth surface. Just enjoy that thought tonight when you go to bed. And good luck with ever trusting anyone ever again. That's also on Facebook from Ed Opperman. Ed says, if we can't watch crappy movies, then the terrorists have won. Amen. Twitter, Rich in Vegas, he hit me with this today, and it made me stop and think. So it's good. He says, Jimmy, Ozzy's band with Rhodes, Sarzo, and Aldridge, or the original Queensryche? Ooh. And that's not even a fair question because you have to actually stop and think because, Rhodes, Sarzo, Aldridge, Ozzy, we all know what that was. Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman. But the original Queensryche? That first EP, Queensryche, The Warning, and you want me to make a choice? Had to go with Ozzy. But that's a tough question, man. That actually made me stop and think. That's how good The Warning was. Email, let's see, how much time do we have here? Okay, we got 2 minutes. Let me get to this first one. Richard Hawkins, over in Belfast, Ireland, sent me a picture today. He says, hope you're doing well. I thought you'd like to know my niece, Shauna, had her baby 2 days ago. She is well, and as is her new 8-pound baby girl, whose name is Evie. And the picture is amazing. And congratulations, Richard. Got the picture. With your permission, I'll post it, but, and then he says, come December 23rd, I'll stop work for 10 days, and I will be calling. Right on, Richard. All the best, brother. Congratulations, Uncle. This email from Mark, he says, talking about last night with Colonel Halt, he says, I consider that Colonel Halt had nuclear access and had to be aware of UFO shutdowns at missile silos. He's a disinfo guy who wants no direct contact or conversation to refute his script. Now, Mark's email was a little longer than that, but it had words that I just can't pronounce. So I cut it down. But, Mark, you know what I'm talking about. But this was interesting. And I think last night, as things drew to a close with Colonel Halt, it was definitely going that way, wasn't it? Absolutely. I'm drinking right now out of my Walter Lewis Question Everything mug. Thank you, Walter, and I will do this live on air. This is what I'm talking about. Happy anniversary. Thank you, Walter. Tonight, Peter Robbins. We're going to get to the bottom of Rendlesham come hell or high water. I'm not playing around with this. Tomorrow night, Steve Murillo, Alex Mistreta will join us live in the studio. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. It is the season. It is anniversary week. Happy holidays, everybody. Tomorrow night, really looking forward to it. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @jchurchradio. When I come back, it was a heck of a news day. I got all that and more. This is Fade to Black. I'll be back right after this. Do not touch that mouse.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Yeah. All right. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Anniversary week. Tonight, bottom of the hour, Peter Robbins will be joining us. See if we can take your calls. Maybe we'll get a couple of surprise calls. We'll see what's up. All right. Today, Sony Pictures canceled the theatrical release of its North Korea comedy, The Interview. That's right. After all of the U.S. theater chains pulled, everybody's freaked out. I'm shocked and amazed at what is going on, what is transpiring right in front of us. Regal Cinemas, AMC Theaters were among the chains announcing they will not show The Interview as planned on December 25th, citing security threats. Now, the move obviously is a sign of this influence that these hackers have over Sony. I don't know what's going on. There's more to this story than we know. I don't know why we would capitulate. It's some B movie. Now, I like Seth. I like Franco. Those guys are funny. And I'm sure it's going to be one of those. But is it worth this, really? Depriving us of, what did Ed Opperman say? Crappy comedies? We live for those. That's the American way. How is this possible? It doesn't make any sense, does it? It's because we don't know the truth. I don't know really what's going on. And then, after all of that, Sony does another release, and they say, Sony Pictures has no further release plans for the interview. And you just got to step back and go, what is going on? Now, they're lucky I'm not Obama. I'm not the president of this country, because I know our military response to this should be flying 5 million copies on DVD with all of the special features right over North Korea, drop them out of C-130s. That's what I would do. C-5A. That's what I would do. I would drop that CD all over the friggin' country. That's exactly what I would do. I'm not kidding. That's exactly what I would do. And this is the other thing. Why can't we, with China, why can't we pull their internet plug? I ask you. This is my David Hatcher Childress. I ask you, why can't we just pull the internet plug? Cut them off. They want to be isolated? Cut them off. It's got to be simple. Can't you flip that switch? They flipped it on us. Can't you flip that switch? Cut them off. Just let them sit there. I don't get it. But the other big news today, President Barack Obama announced that the United States would restore diplomatic relations it severed with Cuba 50 years ago. Oh, yeah. After 18 months of secret talks facilitated by the Vatican and Canada, Obama and Cuban President Raul Castro talked today by phone, did a prisoner exchange, bam, and did it. I never would have thought in my lifetime. It's crazy. Now, I'm happy. Look, I know things went down 50 years ago and all of that, but today is today. We're talking generations later. I know there's people in Miami that are upset right now. Oh, and I get that. I do. I understand. But it's time to move on with all of that. And the Cuban people are great. I mean, and the food is good. And it's just, it had to happen. I feel so good. I feel so happy. And I'm just they're too close to us. They're right there. How many miles off of Key West? I had read today, 90 miles, right there. Boom. So that's, I'm wondering if the partying in the streets is ever going to end in Cuba. Now, what does this mean? Do we get to import Cuban cigars? I got so much email about that today. Cuban cigars and everything else. What's it going to? Immediate flights? Are we going to have real tourism and everything else? Their economy has just got to just blow up immediately overnight, and good for them. I mean, we really put the wraps on them for a long time. And, Canada didn't seem to have any issues, and we're right here. And I'm just glad it's over. So, anyway, I'm going to look. Let me glance over at Twitter here for a second. Status Unknown just says, I want to go to Cuba. I do too. I really, really do. The music, the culture, the food, the people. They're proud, and I'm just glad this was put to end. Okay, let's see. Sony leaks reveal Hollywood is trying to break DNS, the backbone of the internet. Yeah, well, they're doing a damn fine job. The Curiosity rover drilled into a piece of Martian rock called Cumberland, not Cumberland, Indiana, but Cumberland. And found those people in Indy just went, wow, Church made a reference to Cumberland. I know where Cumberland. I used to live in Cumberland. And found some ancient water hidden within it. Now, don't get all excited. Researchers were then able to test a key ratio in the water with Curiosity's onboard instruments to gather some more data and to find out exactly when Mars started to lose its water. In the same sample, Curiosity also detected the first organic molecules it has found. Now, we all know there was life on Mars, and there might be life there now. We don't know when. I'm going to get to that in a second. But the water sample is also about 3 times heavier than Earth's oceans. Now, that's where you stop. When you see a press release like this, oh, life is found on Mars. Finally found it. Found water. Oh, organic, molecules. You get all excited, then you got to read the fine print. And that's the sentence. But the water sample is also about 3 times heavier than Earth's oceans. This means that if Mars surface water started off with a D to H ratio like Earth's, then most of the Martian water likely disappeared before Cumberland, the rock, formed about 3.9 billion years ago. 3.9 billion years ago. That just bums me out. I mean, I've said it so many times. Can't we just go up there and just find out the truth? Does it always have to be this all the time? You never get the straight poop. There are at least 220 journalists imprisoned around the world right now, with 132 of them held on anti-state charges of terrorism or subversion, according to a report released today by the Committee to Protect Journalists, the CPJ. The CPJ census on jailed journalists indicates that 2014 is the second worst year for jailed journalists since the organization started conducting its annual census in 1990. The worst year was 2012, when 232 journalists were jailed. I say it all the time. Aren't journalists supposed to be off limits? You know, you always see the journalists in wartime with, how do I want to say this? Flak jackets on, got the helmet. What's on the back? Press corps. Running out there, dodging bullets. Oh, it says press. Oh, we don't shoot him. We don't capture that guy. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? But check this out. The report does not count journalists being held by non-state actors such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda. The world's leading jailer of journalists is China. Right now, China, 44 reporters in prison, in jail. In September, this bummed me out, and I had to do this. You probably don't know about this. In September, Radio Shack announced its 10th consecutive money-losing quarter. Its cash on hand, and this is unbelievable to digest, its cash on hand has dwindled to $30 million. Cash on hand, Radio Shack, $30 million. What is their weekly payroll? They got $30 million on hand. This time last year, they had $440 million in the bank. They're down to 30 million clams, 30 million ducks quacking in the pond. Radio Shack disclosed that we may not have enough cash and working capital to fund our operations beyond the very near term, which raises substantial doubt about our ability to continue as a going concern. That's right. They have now mentioned the possibility of bankruptcy. And I don't get it. Based in Fort Worth, Texas, Radio Shack, and I saved the best for last, has 5,200 locations. Their stock today is trading for 80 cents a share. How did it get to this point? I just don't get it. Radio Shack. We grew up with Radio Shack. Science kits. Radios, telephones, computers. They're everywhere. There's like 4 right around the studio, right here. Back at our house, there's like 3. How did it get to this point? We can't let Radio Shack fail. 80 cents a share. I say we all go out and buy a buttload tomorrow. Radio Shack in trouble, man. Radio Shack's in trouble. We are all in trouble. And I do mean that. This is Fade to Black. Happy holidays, everybody. This is our anniversary week. When I come back after the break, Peter Robbins will be joining us tomorrow live in the studio. Steve Murillo, Alex Mistretta. We got a lot going on. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us, everybody.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark matter.
Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. This is our anniversary week. 1 year with Dark Matter. We did it. We got her done. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. And Peter Robbins helped us get that done. Peter Robbins been with us, been on with us, oh man, probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. I'll have to ask him. But I'm going to get to the bottom of this Rendlesham thing. I'm on a life's mission. I'm not going to let this one go. I'm going to find out. I'm going to be that guy and proud of it. Peter Robbins is an investigative writer, author, lecturer, best known for his UFO-related papers, columns, articles, editorials, commentaries, lectures, media appearances. He's a regular fixture on radio, and including this program, has appeared as a guest and been a consultant to numerous television shows and documentaries. He is also co-author, along with Larry Warren, another friend of the show, of the highly acclaimed British bestseller, Left at East Gate, a first-hand account of the Rendlesham Force UFO incident, its cover-up and investigation. He was born in New York City and studied art, design, and theater at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut, receiving his BFA from New York City's School of Visual Arts, SVA, where he taught painting for more than a dozen years. I would like to welcome back to the program our good friend. Happy holidays, Peter. How are you? Peter Robbins, everybody.
Hey, Jimmy. Good to be back, and happy holidays to you as well.
What is shaking? Are you knee-deep in snow out there?
Not knee-deep. Rain of the last few days washed most of last week's away, and then today it snowed again.
Insert
just a few inches.
Insert short joke there, and I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. You know what's funny? I don't know if you caught this, but I don't know. It was about 6 months ago. You were over in the UK, and you and Burroughs took some pictures next to each other. Now here,
Well, that was actually Larry. That was over with John. I have taken some pictures back in the day with John, and they look like they've been photoshopped. Can't be that difference in height.
Stop. The picture. So I'm looking, and obviously, you're not the tallest guy in the world. Okay, that's fine. Neither am I. But here's John. I didn't realize John. How tall is John?
Oh gosh, 5'5", 6'5", 6'6". He's a big guy.
Yeah, he's like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, he's a big boy. And then there's you. So you have a really tall guy, and you're standing next to each other, and it was some of the funniest stuff. You must enjoy the ribbing, because when you post stuff like that, here it comes.
You have to be able to take it. It's not even, it's de rigueur if you grow up really tall or really short.
That's it. See, I was always medium. I was always medium.
There's not much of a whole subset of humor for medium-sized people.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. When you're growing up, you always want to be heavier. You want to be skinnier. You want to be taller. You want to be everything that you're not. And for me, I always wanted to crack 6'1", and I always hovered. I shot up to 5'10", 5'11", and stayed right there. I didn't grow anymore. All of my friends, they continued to grow, and I just stopped at 5'11" and 3/4. So that's where I'm at. I was never tall. I was never short. I was never fat. I was never skinny. I was vanilla.
Have you thought about therapy? It might help.
I know, right? Peter. Happy holidays.
Thanks. For me, it's Hanukkah, second night.
It is second night of Hanukkah. Somebody just tweeted the menorah. I just retweeted that. So here we are. The last 6 months, 8 months or so, I've been on this Rendlesham mission. As you know, I've tried to get everybody on the show that's part of it. I've tried to get every researcher on. Well, and I have. I succeeded. Last night, we had Colonel Halt on, who was the last little piece of the puzzle, and we've been working really, really hard at this. I've talked to a lot of people in person, a lot of people on the show, trying to figure this out. Now, I'm going to say this really quick. I'm getting more and more pissed as this starts to unravel in front of me. And I remember when I started to interview people and talk to people on and off the air about Rendlesham, I'd hear something. I'd be like, wait, what? And hold on a minute. But he just said, wait, and I was pulling my hair out. And I've read all the books. I've seen all the documentaries. I've heard all the interviews. I've done the interviews. And here we are today. I'm not sure if we're any closer today to getting to the bottom of this than I was when I started this mission a year ago. And I'm telling you, I've been really, really determined. And I was laser focused last night with Larry. With Colonel Halt. Also concerning Larry, and then John Burroughs on after the show last night, and I talked to you. Well, I talk to you almost every day, but here we are. Are we any closer to getting to the bottom of all of this?
Yes, and I say that from the perspective of somebody who, this past 6 days, since this new wave of controversy has been triggered by a series of remarks that Mr. Halt made last week on Martin Willis's podcast here on the East Coast, followed up by some remarks he made last night. It threw a curve for a number of us, and there were things alluded to, and a very disturbing suggestion about perhaps the ethics of one of the most beloved and respected people in the history of ufology, Bud Hopkins. But I'm speaking here from a perspective, I'm not like the core guys, John Burroughs, Larry, Jim Peniston, Charles Halt, the ones who had it happen to them 34 years ago, short of a few weeks. I'm a newcomer. I'm only 26 years into this. 9 years working on that book with Larry, which we're very proud. of the mark that it made in the United Kingdom and always will be. And an intervening 16, 17 years since, there is an attempt that has been going on to deceive, to mislead, to insinuate information that is not accurate, to rob credibility from certain information that is accurate. And this should be no surprise given the extraordinary significance of the events of December 80 and the fact that they happened in a very militarized context at a tense time in the Cold War in a very loaded piece of real estate area of the United Kingdom. And what I'd like to do tonight is drill down into some of the most recent remarks that have set off, for you, hundreds of emails, for me, a tremendous amount of Facebook messages, emails, an assortment of phone calls from people who are angered, concerned, anxious to a degree, if, again, in the case of Hopkins, if they did work with him and whether or not his archives, now that he's passed, are secure. So with that, Jimmy, I'd like you and your audience to know, because this is me talking, anything that I lay out here, I'm going to be as careful as I can to say it in terms of what I absolutely know and could prove in court, what I believe or think but couldn't, establish with actual evidence, to what I suspect. And as I've always tried to do for more than 35 years I've been involved in this field, is follow the evidence trail wherever it goes, organize my information and corroborate it as well as I can, and lay it out for you all as clearly as possible. So with that understood, some of the remarks that Mr. Halt has made in the last week have included the fact that he feels that Larry Warren, quote, has been used as a disinformation patsy, that Larry, although he has said, in all fairness, and last night, that he can't say whether or not Larry was or wasn't involved, and boy, was he, something that Charles continues to reject, looking at the real physical, analytical evidence for, because then he'd have to admit that it had happened, but that he can't say whether or not Larry was involved because it was a big forest and dark, and, people are in different places. However, he also says just last week that Larry picked up stories from other people. He refers to the narrative that Larry and I spent 9 years putting together and laying out and left at Eastgate as, quote, a story so ridiculous that nobody believes it, except Peter Robbins maybe. I know that he knows the truth, too, suggesting some sinister possibilities there, or that there is going to be a gotcha moment coming up in the future. Charles is on the record in the broadcast as knowing Larry has some, and this was last week, not on your show, some serious substance problems, confirmation of which allegedly comes to him from friends who know him, Larry, well. And to be blunt, last week he referred to Larry as, quote-unquote, a drug addict, which is not only not true, but the legal implications I couldn't even say. He has said, I know enough about what he did, Larry, and what's wrong with the book, our book, and everything else. I have some sworn statements in writing that are very interesting, and so on. Now, I guess I should go back not to the beginnings of the story, but the beginnings of my story with Charles Halt, and briefly bring you and your audience back to a point on an afternoon on June 23rd, 1992. I was working on Left at Eastgate at that point with Larry Warren for 5 years. And how could I not want to speak to, by then, the legendary Colonel Charles I. Halt, Deputy Base Commander of RAF Bentwaters at the time of the events. And I had learned through the grapevine that he had retired the year before, and, just put out a general feeler that I wanted to talk to him. Larry Warren had approached me originally in 1987 as a book writing partner and laid out the proposition in a way that nobody who was interested in creating a deception would ever offer to a co-author, which was, if you want, you can spend all your efforts trying to prove me wrong, that I'm a wannabe or a liar or a psycho or a Manchurian candidate. And if you can do it, it'll make a somewhat schizophrenic book. But you can do that if you want. If you try, and I encourage you, and I did spend a fair amount of time the first year or two trying to do just that, because I knew my name, my reputation. I had never written a book, written a lot of articles and things, but this was major. I was going to fall or rise on this, and I had to be sure. And I did try to disprove his story, and ultimately, not only was I not able to, but I was only able to confirm aspects of it more and more until I realized, to put it simply, he was telling the truth. However, I found out at a certain point late that spring that Charles Halt wanted to speak to me. And so on that day in 1992, I sat at my desk on my apartment on East 46th Street in New York with a certain amount of Larry's paperwork laid out in front of me, a tape recorder, and I made a call. And this is how the first part went. Halt. Hello, me. Mr. Halt? Yes. This is Peter Robbins calling from New York. Oh, Peter Robbins, how are you? I've looked forward to talking to you. Same with me. Did I pick a good time to call? Oh, that's fine. I can talk for about 10 minutes or so. How long have you been retired, sir? About a year. Is it all right with you if I record this? Go ahead. I know that men who were involved are countering each other's accounts, and you've been very outspoken about what Larry says his participation was in that, and I just wanted his participation wasn't. Why do you say that? Because he didn't come on duty until the middle of January, and I can show you documentation to prove that. Well, obviously, I would like to see that. I'm sitting here with some of his service record in front of me. Oh, you've got his service record. Good. Where did you find them? I'm curious. Well, we're going to publish that. I actually can't say right now, although he did leave the service with some of his records. He actually left. I guess the question I'm asking you, did you get something from St. Louis? No. Oh, okay. That's the question I'm asking you because it has a bearing on other things I might tell you or say. Fair enough. I'm not playing a game with you. I'm being very upfront. I appreciate that. One of the things I have here is his assignment to D-Flight, 2 December 1980. That's probably correct. When did he arrive at Bentwaters? Shortly before that. Okay, now let me tell you this. There's a 6 to 8 week training period where one does not get a radio, a gun, a posting, or anything till one has finished all of the training. Would you believe that? Well, I have, and I can produce 100 witnesses, can tell you that, including his superior, who I've just talked to numerous times. Who was his superior? I'm not going to mention because he requested that he not be identified. What I notice here is in the indication at the bottom in Lee Swain's handwriting. Airman Warren will be posted to duty roster D, Flight 10, December 1980. Intro training will commence 5/12/80. And you're saying that the training would have gone on into January, 6 to 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I can assure you, as the deputy base commander, no cop picked up a weapon, picked up a radio, or was given a post until they completed training. I guarantee you. NATO came in and evaluated and looked at the records, and they pulled everything from medical records, dental records, the whole works, and we knew that up front. It's an ongoing thing. Well, what I'm trying to tell you is he's a fraud. Well, I don't think he knows he is. Why do you say that? That's kind of a strange statement to make. I'm not going to tell you on the tape. I'll tell you that personally. And so on. Now, with that understood, let me tell you this. The records that I cited, Larry's in-processing sheet, put him on post with a rifle, with his radio, in training as he was serving, on-the-job training, so to say, in civilian life. Now, how is it possible? Halt, who is a deputy base commander, and on a day-to-day level, as you know, essentially was a commander, how could he get it wrong and me get it right? Well, the fact is that things were not quite right at that moment. There were lots of holes in their staffing for security cops. And it's a shame to say, but they needed bodies posted and ones who are working while they were going through their 6 to 8 week training period, because there had been a major drug bust among the security cops. Also, the documentation that Halt refers to that was going to refute Larry's service record that I had in front of me, when we met, he looked at ours, he agreed it was accurate, he never showed us his. There are not only, how can I say, an indication of antagonism to start with from the moment that he and I began our communications, but certainly that we were in the right and his information was not accurate. Now, with that understood, the first thing I'd really like to get to here involves a close friend of mine of many years, somebody who is no longer with us. It's important.
But let me stop you there.
Oh, yeah. You cut in any time because you know I'll go if you don't.
Let me stop you there. So, the audience, what you just heard was a transcription of a conversation that you had with Colonel Halt over the phone. He gave
beginning of one of 3 transcribed conversations we had.
And he gave you permission to record that call.
In each case, and he got a copy of the tape and certainly had a chance to look at the transcription when he got his copy of the book.
Why would Halt be so adamant in his stance even today after that conversation with you? Couldn't he just discharge everything in his own mind that his memory might have been faulty? Why not go there instead of being steadfast and so black and white?
Jimmy, it all goes back to 1982 and 83. You know the timeline. The events happened late December 1980. My co-author, an American hero as far as I'm concerned, and one of the toughest, kindest, straight-up guys I've ever met, identified himself literally from the time the event happened as somebody to keep an eye on, somebody who was asking questions when they were ordered not to, somebody who was inquiring when they had made it clear that they shouldn't, somebody who was a potential problem. And Larry ended up leaving the service with a fully honorable discharge in May of 81, 6 months after the events. Returned to upstate New York, where his mom was living, with a nice full-blown case of PTSD, some anger issues, and drinking more than he should. And by 82, he felt he could his big issue was not the event itself, but what he was put through the night after, something that I would characterize on Disneyland on acid, and certainly that John Burroughs and Jim Peniston and quite a number of other first-hand witnesses were as well. These men were treated horrendously by elements in the intelligence or military intelligence community. There were drugs involved, hypnosis, God knows what all. And he felt he had to get this story out. In part, and it's all on the timeline, I think one of the things, not that he wasn't already radicalized around this, was that his roommate, who was a fundamentalist kid from the South, who was also involved in the events that he was so challenged by what he had seen that, to be blunt, he ended up blowing his brains out with his M16. And if that wouldn't radicalize you, being one of the first witnesses to come on the scene would.
Well, sure, but let's back up for a second. When was the first time that you were in the presence of all 4 of them at the same time? How many years ago?
Of all, you mean of physically in the presence of John, Jim, Larry, and Charles?
That's right.
Never.
Exactly. So what has
that was
caused, I mean, they've at some point, I think they all got along. You know, at some point, everything was just fine, and then things spiraled out of control. And what does any of it, this thing between Halt and Warren, it shouldn't even be there. It shouldn't even be a concern. It's just part of the incident. And I don't get where the animosity has started.
I do get it, and I'll lay it out for you. First, there never was a time when they all got along. The reason I just gave that brief backstory was that in 1982, by that time, Larry felt he had to speak to somebody who would help get this story out. And he ended up speaking with a known and respected ufologist at the time, who also happened to be a lieutenant in the Coventry, Connecticut Police Department. So Larry Fawcett was certainly professionally equipped to conduct an interview, and he did just that with Larry Warren, and Larry Warren gave him everything he remembered in terms of the individuals involved, time and place as well as he could do it, and was not interested really in talking about the three beings that he saw. It just sounded so crazy and sensational. But with all of the information that Warren gave Fawcett, he was working with a colleague, and they put it in the form of a Freedom of Information Act action, which was not one of the thing that caused the release of that single-page memorandum from later in January that Lieutenant Colonel Halt at the time had written up and filed. And when Halt learned from appropriate sources that that document was going to be released, and to make, if he had any comment on it, he said, yeah, burn it. And you know what? I don't blame him at all. Because of Larry Warren, his name was associated with this event. The story exploded on the front page of the biggest tabloid in the world on October 2nd, 1983, with Charles Halt's name attached. It caused him embarrassment, I'm sure a certain amount of humiliation. He was referred to as the UFO Colonel. His tape recording of his event was played by brother officers at entertainment and cocktail parties, and this is all documented stuff. It impacted negatively on his private life, and there was only one person that set this in motion, and that was Larry Warren. Now, I've actually, some years ago, in fact, on a series of broadcasts leading up to the 30th anniversary, there was one where Larry and I and John and I'm trying to remember, possibly Jim, but Larry and Halt were on the same broadcast. And as we cut to commercial, I said something to the effect of, I understand why you'd hold this against my co-author. It really impacted negatively on your life, but in so many words, can't we put this in our past and all get along? And he responded that no, he didn't hold it against Larry in any way. And I thought to myself, even Mother Teresa would hold it against Larry. So there was animus from the start. I think there was also pressure on Mr. Halt, and I think there also is, and I say I think because I can't prove it, from higher up, to do what he can whenever he can to try to discredit or bring a question to the account of Larry Warren. And he did a very good job of driving a wedge, as far as I'm concerned, between Warren and Burroughs and Peniston. I mean, although these three guys were involved on different nights, they should be like brothers in arms. They weren't at the same battle, but they were in the same war, and they have all suffered tremendously. Now, John Burroughs...
They have, and I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
With all of this, there's one key person that keeps coming up, and that's Adrian Bustenza.
Yes.
And he is like, he's Halt's guy. Halt, he drove the Jeep. He was there. And of course, Larry Warren's accounts with Adrian Bustenza as well. Has Adrian Bustenza come forward and said, I was with Halt and I was with Larry Warren. Larry Warren was there. Let's put this to bed right now.
Yeah, good. Yes, actually, he has said both. In fact, as recently as I think a year ago, October, he made a point through a mutual friend, which has been confirmed, and it is Adrian's voice who posted this. It was in caps, literally, which was, yes, yes, Larry Warren was there. And then he goes on to say, and so were the other men involved. Now, he was also authentically and fully with Charles Halt and his contingent of 5 enlisted men when they had their experience on the third night, which I think chronologically was sometime earlier than Larry Warren's experience several hundred yards away. Also, for anybody that wants to read the longest interview ever recorded, transcribed with Adrian Bustinza, go to Left at East Gate. I think it runs something like, 16, 17 pages, and it's conducted by Larry Fawcett. And once again, he confirms that he was with Larry Warren. It is fascinating, and it's also somewhat frustrating at the end. For me, Fawcett, who's no longer with us, sadly, as a really professional interviewer, this is one of the interviews of his life, and you can feel him at the end getting more and more excited and pushing at Adrian. And at a certain point, Adrian saying, "Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing to see," and then he kind of withdraws. There's just too much push. But he once again confirms that Larry is there. I think Adrian was smart enough from the start to realize getting yourself involved in this is going to be detrimental to the quality of your life. And he has come forward, made statements on and off over the years, but has asked repeatedly that his privacy be observed. I know a number of people that are Facebook friends with him, a number of friends that speak to him irregularly. I always wish him the best. I always hope in the back of my mind that at some time, perhaps he will come forward as an actual public person. And you know what, Jimmy, at the same time, after all these years and seeing the way that people, not just the skeptics and debunkers, have treated Larry, but definitely people within ufology, because Larry is a no-nonsense character. He's not a nicey-nicey kind of person. He's the kindest, funniest guy and the most generous that you can imagine, but he lives his life based on respect, and there are so many people that don't, and it's always behind his back or on the Internet.
Certainly.
And that's the way it is. I don't blame Adrian for not wanting to become part of this sideshow, and at the same time, I would love to see, like you and like the men involved, us to be able to get to the bottom of this, or at least closer to the bottom of it, and make some real change.
With everybody's accounts, when I say everybody, everybody's inclusive here, from Halt to Warren and everybody in between. Halt and Burroughs and Penniston have all told me, I haven't had Larry on the show directly, but Larry's over in the UK now. If you're listening, call in. Would love to talk to you. Hang on for a second. Okay. Is the statements that they made in Halt's office, did Larry did Larry do a written statement?
Oh, yes. And he writes it up in great detail in his account. Absolutely.
And he did that in Halt's presence?
No.
Okay,
No, it wasn't in
so
Halt's presence.
I want to get to I want this straightened out too as well. Okay, so who did Larry submit his statement to? I'll
tell you what. As we're talking here, I will pull it up, because I don't like. I am not, Larry's spokesman, and at the same time, there's no reason that I should speak for him. But at the same time, he has put certain things on the record in print. And in this case, I'm going to read you something right out of Left at East Gate that will lay out and answer that question for you.
Well, and I only ask because Penniston, and Burroughs and Bustinza all went into Halt's office and made their statements, and they told Halt about the incident, and they wrote it up, and that was the end of it. Halt doesn't remember those guys getting debriefed. But he says that they were debriefed because he was told by the wing commander later that they were, and that they didn't know who was involved with the debriefing. Again, it just gets a little more cloudy.
Let me uncloud. Someone. Okay, here we go. I noticed two nice cars and government plates parked across the street. Front major jewelry, motion dust inside. This is into the assistant of the security police. We were all very quiet. The office was strangely void of personnel, only an airman operating the law enforcement communications console. We faced a long counter on which numerous documents were arranged in stacks, one for each of us. I tried to scan them, but they were too much to absorb. A staff sergeant named Jackson, whom I recognized from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which of course is AFOSI, told us to sign our names at the bottom of each document and not to forget to write our Social Security numbers under the names. Someone asked if we could read the documents we were signing. Major Drury told him he could read them later. There wasn't any time now. As I leafed through mine, I tried to remember all I could in the time I had. One was a joint Army-Navy air publication, Ep.176, a rather standard, all-encompassing security document. A few others seemed routine as well, not unlike the papers I had signed when I entered the Air Force, basically reaffirming our security oaths. But two staple pages stood apart from the rest. As I read them, I got mad. The document was a typed statement as to what each of us had seen in the forest. Each statement was the same, a whitewash of what we had witnessed the night before. It stated that we had only seen some unusual lights in the trees and nothing more. I couldn't believe it. An airman named Russell protested the contents of the statement, saying it was not accurate. We were told to sign them and go into Major Ziegler's office.
Okay,
I signed the damn thing and walked into the chief's office.
Hold it right there. I think we have a surprise guest on the line. Who's calling?
Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
I know that voice.
Richard,
you let anybody talk on this show. God.
I just figured I would do the equivalent of photobombing you on your own.
Richard Dolan, everybody. How are you tonight, Richard? Happy holidays.
Yes, and to you, Jimmy. It's nice to be here. How are you guys both doing?
We're doing that Rendlesham thing. Last night,
yes,
as you know, we had a Colonel Halt on the show, and then we had John Burroughs on after that, and we're following up tonight with Peter. And let me throw this out there at you, Richard, really quick. And again, happy holidays. Thank you for calling in. And it's very late out in New York for both of you, but thank you for taking the time. Richard, when it comes to Rendlesham, it is so significant. What is it that bothers you the most about Rendlesham when you look at all of the evidence? Because we're trying to weed through this crazy incident. Yeah. What bothers you about Rendlesham?
Good question. I would say what intrigues me, bothers me, engages me about the Rendlesham case. First of all, we have to just lay out the fact that it's probably one of the most significant modern UFO cases. I say that there are probably dozens of other events that have happened in our history that are equally dramatic, but we don't know about them all. Most of what goes on in the national security circles regarding UFOs remains classified, but this came out. It's important because, A, it involved nuclear weapons and advanced technology that was stored at that site. It's part of a long history of interest by these other entities, other agencies, whatever they are, UFOs, in our advanced weaponry, advanced technology, and nuclear capabilities. This goes back right to the 1940s, right at the beginning of our nuclear technology in the American Southwest and throughout everywhere else where we've had nukes. That's one thing. The other thing about the Rendlesham case that I think is important to keep in mind is that our understanding of that case has evolved very, very much over the decades and indeed over the now generations that have taken place.
Right.
This case occurred in December 1980. That's 34 years ago, quite a while. And it came out, as I like to say, by drips and drabs over the years. And it's the gift that keeps giving. Not many cases can claim to have the kind of longevity in terms of new information that this case has had, and it just won't die.
That's right.
One thing that I just think is important to mention that Peter hasn't, he may have, because he was certainly involved in extracting this information, but is the key fact that a beam of light during one of the nights of the encounters was seen by Colonel Halt and by other personnel at the base. Beam of light coming from one of those objects, coming down to the base. And in the words of the people on the site at where the ordnance was being stored, that is the nuclear ordnance. That beam of light penetrated alternate layers of dirt and concrete, adversely affecting the ordnance. These were the words of Colonel Halt to Peter and Larry Warren in an interview back in the 1990s, and Peter could tell you all about it if he hasn't already.
Right.
To me, this is significant. There's so much more, because what we learn about this case is that it certainly has involved mind control by the military over its personnel in hiding this case and obfuscating on this case. And it's obviously, it goes without saying, as again, I'm sure Peter, I'm just repeating, I'm sure what he said, but the fact that Larry Warren was involved here, there's no serious researcher of this case any longer who denies that Larry Warren was involved. Anyone who denies it, I think we can safely say, is really not a serious player, a serious analyst of the case. It's very obvious, and just recently Larry provided absolute proof in the form of a letter back to his mother immediately after the incident and before Colonel Halt's famous memo.
That's right.
Of January 1981 that describes. So Larry Warren was absolutely there. He knew all about it. So he's involved, and so his testimony, although it's not in line with everything that, like John Burroughs has said, James Henderson, they were not where Larry was for much of it. So Larry's testimony is distinct, but it has to be considered as valid as any of the other testimonies that we've gotten. So we're talking about a very complex incident, and I would only add, maybe the last thing I should say here is that I doubt that we'll ever get to the absolute bottom of everything that happened there, partly because of the military secrecy and lies that have been developed. I mean, hey, the UK still to this day hasn't admitted that they have nukes down over there.
That's right.
I mean, this
right.
is how infantile the level of discussion is, the official discussion, where you can't even admit the most obvious thing about the case. But B, the complexity of the case itself cannot be denied. This took place over several days, and I would doubt, frankly, that even the military players at the highest level probably grasped everything that was going on there. This seems to have been very, very advanced kind of event that was going on there.
Halt last night on the show, and I know that he's alluded to this over the years, but last night he was very direct in saying it was E.T. He said it. I mean, he didn't mince words. He didn't say, well, it could have been, it could have been. No, right. He said that last night. He did say, finally, just absolutely adamantly, live on the air, said that those beams of light came down in the weapons storage area as well as at his feet, and that there were multiple witnesses for that. And then when I asked him about the nuclear ordinance, and I said, you still may be bound by some kind of oath to this, mm-hmm. but were there nuclear weapons there? And he said, I can't answer that. So that's it. That's fine. That's the answer I was looking for. Without saying yes, he said yes. And those are all the crucial parts in this for Colonel Halt. That the way that I look at it, why have a beef with Larry Warren when it was a separate incident? I mean, it was a separate location of a singular incident that spanned 3 days. And I don't get the infighting part of it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it does to me. It does make sense to me, because you have to understand what Larry Warren was talking about was a lot more than simply a UFO being seen over this military base. Larry Warren was talking about a probable communication between the base commander, Gordon Williams, and these beings. That's part of it. That's really a radical thing to say. And B, Larry Warren was the guy, before anyone else, who talked about being taken underground to a facility for debriefing, being subjected to mind control. You think about this is serious allegations here. And by the way, that probably sounded outrageous to people in the 1980s. I can tell you, I personally have spoken with individuals in the U.S. Air Force in the 1980s at the same time who were subjected to very comparable forms of mind manipulation. This was going on in the Air Force. I'm sure it goes on today in militaries around the world. So, in other words, Larry Warren broke the code. And my opinion, and Peter can offer his own, I'm not a military person, but I talk to these people, and it's very clear that Larry Warren was the guy who broke this case, put them all out there, embarrassed everyone, and furthermore stated things that were very unseemly about the way that the U.S. military handled itself.
Thank you so much.
So he had to be dismissed. He had to be disabled in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. I said to Halt last night, well, there was two other things. I'm speaking for him, but it was on the air, so there you go. But he said that this was a case of mind control. Something went down in the debriefing, and he felt bad for everybody that was involved. And it was a very, he's the deputy base commander. For him to come out and admit that on the air, I thought was pretty strong. And then
this is what I mean about this case. It keeps giving because, Halt was not saying things like this 10 years ago or even 5. So, as the years go by, it's like we're chipping away and more information and admissions are being made. It's fascinating.
I'm going to get to the bottom of this, man. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. I'm on a mission.
We're rooting for you.
Hey, Richard, thank you so much. And again, enjoy the holidays. I'll be speaking to you soon, and I'll see you very soon as well. And by the way, get a haircut, okay, pal? Get a haircut. Either get a haircut.
Yeah, hey, guess what, man? The hair stays.
Or start playing guitar, okay? It's one or the other. I'll talk to you.
Rich, don't listen to him. Stay the way you are. See you in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, man.
Yes, indeed, Peter. Everyone, you guys have a great night. Good night to all the listeners. Take care.
Don't you wish we were still back in Brazil?
Yeah.
Oh, indeed, sir.
Man, I saw those pictures. I was fully jealous. Thank you so much, Richard. Have a good night.
Be well, Rich. Speak to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Jimmy, let me jump in here and just make a quick series of comments on the comments you guys did. Charles Halt, I know that he is... his opinion is that this is an extraterrestrial phenomena. That's what I believe and think the most likely scenario, the most likely cause of these things. However, I can't say, as he said, that it was extraterrestrial because there's no way of knowing. And that may sound like parsing my words, but it's not. It's taking what you feel, think, or believe and stating it as empirical fact, which is a problem for me. Also, Rich, who, bless his heart, really is one of my dearest friends, and we live fairly close by, so we give each other a hard time regularly. He categorized, he talked about Gordon Williams, who actually was the base wing commander, not the base commander, as somebody that Larry identifies as out in that field at a certain point, with the beings involved in this and communication going on. There was a face-off. Any mental health professional will tell you that 70-80% of human communication is nonverbal. But part of the mythology, and it spins off of that word communication, is that there were handshakes, candy bars were given to these beings, we helped them repair their ship, and an incredible amount of nonsense. Also, because this is the nature of an exciting dialogue like this, I must insist that I have a couple of minutes to run with a centrally important allegation that I need to address relative to a very important name in ufology that was brought into this story last week by Mr. Halt, and that is Bud Hopkins. And if I might just run with that for a couple of minutes.
Hey, sorry about that. I was just talking to Don Schmidt. He called in the middle of the... I was like, man, what's going on? And he called my cell. So, but, do us a favor right now. Exactly the short, the Twitter version, exactly how Larry was called to the scene and how that event happened that evening. Okay, just take us through that. I mean, this is for historical documents, so to speak, for tonight's show.
Very briefly, Larry had returned from a 2-day pass. He was not aware of events that had transpired the previous 2 days. He was on guard duty that night, D-flight on the security cops. He was, this is a very tense moment in the Cold War. He was manning the furthest perimeter post, perimeter post 18, and he was out there. He had his M16 and his Motorola radio, and he started hearing chatter coming from further down the line of men who were seeing unidentifieds low on the horizon and little nervous humor. A more senior person came on, told him to pipe down. Shortly thereafter, he was told to close down his post. A vehicle would be by to pick him up to take him to on a new assignment. And a base pickup truck, as I recall, driven by Lieutenant Bruce England with Sergeant Adrian Bustinza, and I think one of the personnel did pick him up. They proceeded to the motor pool, where they joined other vehicles that were attaching light-alls, the big military equivalent of the civilian Klieg lights that we associate with old Hollywood premieres, these ones gas-operated, to the back of the vehicles. They checked the level of the gas tank, made sure they worked, and headed out the main gate after midnight and drove 5 to 6 miles past their sister base, RAF Woodbridge, made a left onto a logging road into the Rendlesham Forest, just past the East Gate Road of RAF Woodbridge, went maybe a third of a mile, came into an area where the road widened. Men disembarked, weapons were collected, broken into 3-man groups. Each group had a radio. Orders were to head that way into the woods and investigate a disturbance. They encountered a very powerful electromagnetic effect and ultimately entered a field, a farmer's field called Capel Green, where they observed a large oval ground fog that was self-contained and glowing, self-illuminated, and no ambient light, and they were ordered to surround it, and that contingent of men did. Shortly thereafter, a red light came in from the direction of the North Sea, a ball of reddish light, and I can only imagine that all eyes were on it as it not only came in over the field, but over that spot, and then without a sound exploded with magnesium brightness. That flash of light, by the way, burned the retinas of my co-author's eyes. We have the Air Force medical documentation to back that up. When the temporary blindness that happens when a wall of flash bulbs goes off, or the equivalent, a few seconds later, there in the fog was a structured, articulated craft. Some men ran off. Most held their positions. At a certain point, Sergeant Ball, who was a senior NCO, ordered Larry and Adrian, who was standing next to him, to go closer. And they were very close at the time. They did. They backed off. Shortly thereafter, or sometime thereafter, they observed a glowing light coming around the far side. And in fact, as they were able to see it more clearly, there were 3, and the light dimmed. They could observe 3 distinct shapes in it, which were ultimately beings. At a certain point, a staff car came out into the field, and the man who we are sure was Gordon Williams came out in a very peaceful face-off, stood, looked at these beings, they looked at him. At that point, men were being tapped out and being told to go back to the staging area to be taken back to the base. And Larry was in the second-to-last group, stopped where the forest met the field, fixed the picture in his mind, and then headed back to the staging area. And that, in microcosm, was the third night event that Larry was involved in. It's important also to know that the soil analysis, specific, absolutely specific to the site that Larry identified, drawn from that spot, and then control samples from out into the field, the results were so dramatic that they still stand as the most powerful piece of physical evidence associated with the event, ironically, that Colonel Halt is convinced never happened. And again, that is it. But if I might, I really feel it's important for many people that I try to clarify this confusion that was set up last week relative to Bud Hopkins and this story, if I might.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to Bud in a second, because that is so very important, and we've got to get to that. And Bud is such a well-respected gentleman and researcher and everything in not only ufology but just in his practice. And he's so let's get to that in a second. The one thing that that as I look at all of these events, that the third night with what Halt was seeing and Bustenza and everybody else, those five guys and the tape recording and everything. Well, there's obviously another event that was happening either before Halt went out there at midnight. What time or thereabouts? What time did Warren? What time did Larry?
Arrived well, or sometime after midnight as well. And to throw a fact in that is not well known, and my colleague Gary Hazeltine, who worked for a number of years very closely with Charles Halt, is the person who shared this with me. Namely, that if you know the area well, there is a number of landmarks. There's the farmer's house, there's a big oak tree, there's a stand of trees in front of which Larry's event took place. Colonel Halt and his men had one in the woods. I don't know whether it was 100 yards or 2 or whatever, but they did come out into the field at a certain point.
That's right.
And I think, and I say think because I don't know, that the time frame is correct for Larry's, the event that he was involved in. They go around the big stand of trees into the second field, and they come around the other side. Now, in Gary telling me this, he knows the area as well as I do. And at that point, there is no way that the event that my co-author was involved in could not have been missed by him. And Gary said, "What did you see?" And it's very easy to remember Mr. Halt's response as a quotation because of its nature. He said to Gary, "That's the funny part. I don't remember."
Well, I asked, and that's why I was leading up to this, because I asked Colonel Halt about this last night. Could some of what you saw last night, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember my exact words, could some of what you have seen, could that have been Larry Warren's event too as well? And Colonel Halt's response was, "Well, Larry wasn't there." And I said, but that's not. But that's
one day he's not there.
I know, but that's not my question. My question is, could the event that Larry reported be the same event that you saw? Is there any chance? That's the question. It's not. I'm not asking you if Larry was there. I'm asking you if the event was, and that's what I said to Colonel Halt last night. It sounds to me at the third night, the timing of everything is the same. And could these be? They're described, the flash of light. He couldn't really identify what the craft looked like that was next to the house, but certainly he said that it was so bright he thought the house was on fire.
Well,
and Larry gives the same description.
No, he doesn't.
Well, no. With the bright flash of light.
A flash of light.
That's right.
Right.
And Colonel Halt says the same. No, the description of the crafts are two different things. I'm just saying, could the events be the same event? That's all that I want to try to nail this down, because first off, it's not that big of an area. It is a big area, but it's not that big of an area.
No. And for me, you're talking about a light that comes over him and then, as I recall, breaks into 5 separate pieces, as opposed to a landed, fully articulated craft on the ground of appreciable size, less than 20 feet from where the men were standing. We're talking about 2 decidedly different phenomena, and again, a great deal of confusion around it.
A lot of confusion around it. There's one key thing here that I need to drive home. Colonel Halt said himself, and so did John Burroughs, that there were many craft. There were craft buzzing them. There was craft flying over here. There's craft flying over there. There's beams of light. There was all kinds of craft.
On different nights at different locations. It's not all going on at the same time.
Well, that night with Colonel Halt said that they were buzzed. A light buzzed them. And then,
correct, by a craft.
Right, and another craft is blinking and brightening up next to the house. There's the other craft that was creeping along inside the forest with the blinking eye and the dripping metal. And then you have the other craft that is beaming lights down on the weapons storage area. So I ask, again, to everybody here, when Larry is doing his thing, and seeing what he saw with the craft, and an excellent drawing, excellent description, and the possibility of beings being in the light, that could it have been one of the other craft that was buzzing around? Could this all have been the same event?
I doubt it.
What do you mean you
doubt it? And what I'm saying is based on 26 years of study, focused mostly on what was going on in that field.
No. You're misunderstanding me, Peter. You're misunderstanding me. I'm not suggesting that Halt saw Larry Warren's craft. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying the same event. There was
the same machine in different places at different times.
It could have been 3 or 4 crafts, but it was an event. It was 3 or 4 crafts coming down on the same night. It was an event, and that's my point. And to stop and deny or try to, I'll say it right now, try to poo-poo this whole thing down, it doesn't make sense, because Larry is describing something that he's witnessing. Halt is witnessing something. John Burroughs that third night was seeing stuff too as well. And so it was an event, like a rock concert is an event. That's what I'm suggesting. They were just guys at different locations witnessing phenomena. And I could not get Colonel Halt to even come close to saying, yeah, well, you know what, maybe. And I just don't understand that. It was an event. It was a huge, it was a show. It was like Close Encounters. Peter?
Jimmy, can I get to my topic, please? A lot of people are waiting to hear it.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's important that we take some time as to how and why the late Bud Hopkins' name was drawn into Charles Halt's remarks last week and its implications. Charles describes his relationship with the artist and author and investigator as being very good friends, and that Bud had given him, quote-unquote, full access to his files. We were told last week that the retired colonel had listened to, and reading his wording carefully, actually had an audio cassette copy of July 1995 regressive hypnotic session that Larry Warren did with Bud, which I will say is fully transcribed with an exception I will tell you about, in Left at Eastgate word for word. Now, if Charles Halt had received that tape from Bud, it would have constituted a breach of confidentiality so gigantic that it most definitely should have ended his career if he were alive.
Okay, we need to explain. You need to set this up for the audience. You jump to the end.
Okay.
Bud Hopkins, hypnotherapy, regression.
Not hypnotherapy. Let me.
But hold on. Just let me set this up for everybody. I don't want to get ahead. We can't get ahead. Bud Hopkins regressed Larry Warren and had recorded the sessions. Okay, now
with me as a witness, yes.
With you as a witness. Now, what year? How many sessions? And how long were they?
There was I think it was 87 that he did an initial, not amazingly revealing regression with Larry, but the one we're talking about was done at Larry Warren's request, July 1995, and he had asked Bud to bring him back to the night after the event when he was taken against his will, subdued with a chemical aerosol, and missing for 24, 30 hours. I forget the exact number. And that as in all cases where more than 1,000 tapes that I know were logged in, the confidentiality was guaranteed. And unless, and I don't think it ever happened, that some outsider would ask for a copy of somebody's cassette, you'd have to have a written release to have it. And Mr. Halt suggested last week that he not only had heard this tape, which there was no way any of us could figure he could have gotten by any appropriate means, but that he had a copy. So that is the springboard here. And again, if he had been given the copy by Bud, who he says was a very good friend, Bud's name should be reviled. He broke every rule of confidentiality imaginable. And it's arguable that if he was a friend or even a house guest, even if he is a retired military officer, that giving him full access, and that is the phrase that Mr. Halt used, to the massive and highly confidential files that Bud had, should also be career-ending in terms of what it was. Now, the question here is what actually happened. And for me, it troubled me tremendously when I heard it because because Bud was a very dear friend of mine of 35 years, and I worked as his assistant for about half that time. And in that time, I was privy to many of these files. I witnessed many hypnotic regressions. I logged in the tapes. I knew the people. I was a confidant. And I knew that Charles Halt had spoken for the Intruders Foundation once because I was the one that suggested that Bud invite him. I've since learned that Mr. Halt has said that he and his wife were house guests at Bud's for a number of times. And for me, the only connection here is Bud's partner, Leslie Kean, the well-known UFO writer and journalist, who not only is a friend of Charles, but also includes a chapter by him in her well-received book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. Now, what was not commonly known is that when Bud was facing the end of his life, he let us know that he wanted all of his materials, every tape, every file, every photograph, everything involved in his massive archive, boxed up and brought to, for safekeeping, the home of his closest colleague and best friend, Dr. David Jacobs, which is just what happened. And that is where that material had been ever since. So the way that Mr. Halt had worded it, we were left to feel that how else could he have gotten the tape unless Bud gave it to him? But that's really not what happened. A year and a half back, after Bud had died, I was rereading the transcription of Larry's 95 regression, which, as I said, is fully transcribed in the book, with the exception of 8 words at the end of the transcription. Those 8 words are 4 names. At the end of the transcription, toward the end of the session, Larry is being walked through a hallway and by another personnel, and there is a door. He's asked to open it, and he goes in. And I'm sitting right there. Bud's sitting right there. Larry is fully under. He's 19 years old. It was amazing. And Bud said, "Is anybody there?" And Larry said, "Yes." And he said, "Who?" And Larry, much to our shock, named 4 men who were also involved. And we looked at each other like, my God, this is completely unexpected. Do these men even know they were involved? And if so, this information must be kept confidential. So when I transcribed the tape, I made sure to leave out those 8 names. And again, about a year and a half ago, I was reading through the book, and I thought, wow, that was an amazing session, and I know I did a first-rate job of transcribing it. Absolutely not a typo, not a period out of place. But who were those 4 guys again? And I asked Larry, and he didn't remember. And so I contacted Dave, and I said, Dave, can I get a copy of the tape from you? Now, the only way, and he said, of course, but he said, listen, even though I know that you and Larry are extremely close, I need written permission. So ask him to send me an email, and I'll do it. Now, the email that Larry sent him read this way, and I'm saying it here word for word. Hi, David. It's been a long time. Peter told me to contact you, R.E. Budd's tape, with me concerning Rendlesham, etc. And indeed, I give you permission to release it and use it in any way. Also, I extend same to Peter Robbins, wishing you and yours all the best, Larry Warren. Now, the operative phrase here in Larry's email, which, Lord knows, we both regret, is use in any way. Okay, I got the tape. That was that. Jump ahead to early October, just this past October. Dave receives an email from Charles Halt, and he told me that the only things that he knew or remembered about Rendlesham were what he read in Left at East Gate, the great majority of which he had now forgotten. And he never met Halt. All he knew about him was that he had spoken for Bud's group once. He was a friend of Leslie's, and as such, it would not surprise him if he socially knew Bud, and that he had been the deputy base commander at RAF Bentwaters. And what Halt requested in the email was if he could hear this tape. Now, Dave established for me that in his whole career, no outsider had ever contacted him, whether it was for his materials with the people he's worked with or with Bud, to hear somebody else's confidential material. You would have to get their written permission. There'd have to be a release form. And he checked his records, and he found the file copy of the email that Larry had sent. Now, let us think here for a moment and realize that Larry giving that blanket permission, and he said to use in any way, I extend to Peter Robbins, or to use in any way, is a remarkable mark of his openness and his honesty. And don't let anybody lose sight of that. Now, with that understood, Dave simply followed what he interpreted as Larry's wishes and sent his former base commander a copy. I should stress here also that David had no idea of Halt's aggressive negative history with Larry. And this was followed by a phone call from Charles Halt to Bud. To David. And he asked him a series of questions about Larry Warren, which, again, David answered as honestly as he could. Now, before I go any further, everybody should be aware that David Jacobs, who is a former professor of history at Temple University and one of the most important people in the history of UFO abduction studies, is in the process of completing a book he's working on for 7 years. One of the things he made clear in our exchanges by email and a very long phone call and several short ones over the past few days is the last thing he wants or needs is to be drawn into this quicksand that is Rendlesham. And so I request that people not contact him. Now, again, the only way that Charles Halt could have known that the material was warehoused at Dave's was through Leslie. And what possible interest could he have in hearing the tape? It was fully transcribed in the book. Well, there's only two things that I can think of. One is to see if it was 100% accurate. Let's say that he heard the tape and there was something interesting in it that I had not transcribed or had not indicated that there was a breach in the material with the necessary 3 dots. Number one, there might be some material that he could use against Larry. And number two, he could also use it against me as a breach of personal ethics for removing the material without indicating same. What immediately disturbed me, and David got it in a second, was that Halt was now aware of the names of these 4 men that he had no business knowing. And Dave followed up and let him know that no way could he ever reveal those names. Now, thinking it through, as much as I'm not a fan of Charles Halt's, I respect the fact that there is no reason whatsoever not to follow that edict. There is no win by outing these men and everything to lose. It would be absolutely egregious to do something like that. However, what we're left with here is a situation where somebody who should not have had access to that material on a very lucky act, because it was, and David said it was the one thing in his files. Nobody had ever filed a blanket statement like that with him. And this, I found it really objectionable. And I also wonder why, if he went to the trouble of getting it, why he couldn't be honest with us. We were left for a week, and I apologize to everybody I've left hanging out there, because I wanted to pull this all together and say it as clearly as I could on your show, you can't imagine how many people have contacted me with concern of what's going to happen to my tapes. Nothing, unless if you work with Bud or are working with Dave, nothing will allow that material to have this kind of thing to happen, because you are the one that has to give permission. Again, due to Larry's extraordinary honesty and openness, a mark of his character and his truthfulness in this, it was on record that you could share it. And so, without realizing the motivation, Dr. Jacobs did.
Well, and also this is very important to say. I mean, when you're getting regressed, you're not necessarily in control of what you're going to say.
You're incredibly vulnerable.
You're vulnerable, and that is about as private and personal as any type of session, doctor-patient situation that you can ever imagine, and nobody should have access to that. I mean, look, if I'm ever regressed, I'll tell you right now, man, I wouldn't want to go back and listen to it. You don't know.
You're absolutely right there. My sister, who was an abductee, Helen, had been regressed by Bud and another hypnotist, and I still have those tapes. She never wanted to listen to them again. They were part of her record. And Jimmy, if I can just jump in again, I have to say this because it's my opinion, and it was David's opinion too, that Mr. Halt, who has on record exaggerated a number of times. It's not the worst sin in the world, but it's not accurate. There is no way that Bud would have given him full access to his files. I think that's an unsubstantiated brag. There were thousands. It wouldn't have been done. He gave fullest access possible to Dr. Jacobs, Dr. Mack, who was a good friend of his, people like Roger Lear, or Stanton Friedman if he would have asked, but a small group of colleagues. And this brings us to an important point. Charles has characterized his relationship with Bud as being very good friends. The last 10 years of Bud's life, we remain very good friends, but after my sister died, we didn't see each other quite as much. And it's important that people have some understanding of how Bud felt about Larry Warren, his relationship to the Rendlesham Forest incident, and to my work with it. Now, in a microcosm, Bud, who was a friend and a colleague, gave us a wonderful blurb for the back of the first edition, and it reads thusly: "This is a powerful and compelling book. For me, the implicit central theme is the author's personal courage and relentless search for truth in the face of official deception and attempts at direct intimidation. Warren and Robbins' narrative has the force of a well-told mystery novel, yet it is all disturbingly true. A major contribution to the literature." Now, I'm not reading that in to blow my own horn. It's a blurb on the back of a book given by a friend. But when it was republished 7 years later, Bud was proud to write the foreword for Larry and I, and I'd like to make my last major contribution to the show, reading a part of that, because it's important that people understand this. Quoting Bud: In their detailed study of the UFO events at 2 adjoining British air bases, Bentwaters and Woodbridge, in late 1980, we find the highly personal voice of Larry Warren, an actual participant in both the encounters themselves and their subsequent cover-up, in tandem with the more detailed, objective words of the veteran UFO investigator Peter Robbins. An attentive reader cannot escape either the legitimate emotions of the witness or the investigator's clear, rational search for truth. Left at East Gate is a complex book. In its pages, Larry Warren vividly describes his battle with personal demons, some typical of the 19-year-old late adolescent that he was at the time, and others that followed his attempts to come to grips with an unimaginable and oppressive series of events. After his UFO encounters, more conflicts followed young Warren, a combination of the pressures he was subjected to by officials of the cover-up and his slowly deepening need, in spite of the risks, to go public with his experiences. His bravery in the face of direct and indirect threats becomes vividly apparent in Left at East Gate. For his part, Peter Robbins smoothly describes the origins of his interest in the Bentwaters-Woodbridge UFO events, his first meeting with Larry Warren, and their difficult, rocky path these two temperamentally disparate men followed in telling the story of Left at East Gate. Robbins' accounts of their joint visits to the original sites and the uneasiness he felt as they trampled through the ominous fields suggests the way in which an outside investigator can become enmeshed in the emotional reactions of the witness vicariously, coming to share his state of mind. There are a number of reasons why the incidents at Bentwaters-Woodbridge, taken together, comprise the best and the most important UFO case in the United Kingdom. First, in the sheer number of credible witnesses to the UFO flyovers and landings, as well as the range of official documents, etc. I could go on, but that was important to me that you know that as part of the story. And I'll just close by saying, in the interest of full disclosure, and again, this is Bud. We love you, Bud, and so many of us miss you so much. The reader should know at the outset that I am personally well acquainted with both Larry Warren and Peter Robbins. As the two authors described in Left at East Gate in 1995, I conducted an hypnotic regression with Larry Warren, as well as a number of probing conversations about his experiences, as well as an enlightening telephone interview with his mother. Peter Robbins I have known for more than 20 years. Not only has he assisted me in handling the voluminous and sensitive office correspondence I received from UFO experiencers, but we have worked together well on various field investigations. Thus, I know firsthand the intelligence and objectivity he has brought to this investigation in the incidents at Bentwaters. I am aware that to some, this familiarity disqualifies me as an objective commentator on Left at East Gate. However, to others, it may seem as adding greatly to my understanding of Larry Warren and his role in this extraordinary case, and to Peter Robbins' essential competence and investigatory skills. Between the 2 points of view, of course, the choice is yours to make. Thank you for letting me put that on the record, Jimmy. And the choice is yours to make, my friends.
Absolutely. And which... After hearing that, I'm going to throw this back at you. With everything that has transpired over the last 7 days, which yourself, myself, and the other parties that are involved in this, we all got wrapped up into this week, and that's why I've covered it this week.
Yes.
It's a difficult thing to go through, to get dragged through this mud. And how do you find yourself? You've been doing not only Rendlesham but research like this for so many years. How thick is your skin, and how do you deal with this every single day, or not?
That's a really important question. I am one of the luckiest people I know, and a lot of this, Jimmy, goes back to the stuff you're made of. I have the best parents in the world. The two greatest sisters anybody could imagine, except for your normal routine traumas. Grandpa died, dog died, the tall girl with the breasts didn't dance with me, short kid with glasses. I had a very happy childhood. And, then the 60s exploded and things got much happier. I have spent my life doing things that I feel are important and meaningful. I've worked in nonprofits, the arts, theater management, painting. I chipped out on a Norwegian freighter when I was young and saw the world. I was on my own for a year at my wit's end, traveling around Asia. I had a wonderful therapist years ago. I worked in crisis intervention for 8 years. I've got it pretty much together in terms of handling my stress. However, it gets to me. The thing maybe that is different with me is I have a great support system. I can process it at a lively rate. I know what it feels like to be absolutely as miserable, as helpless, as hopeless as a human being can be. But I also know the other extreme. I also know that I've got a tremendous amount of strength that I can lend to people that I care about. You couldn't find two more different people than Larry by example, and this is, of course, the most pronounced investigation I've ever been involved in, and I guess technically I still am. We love each other like brothers. I understand post-traumatic stress disorder to a degree, which he suffers from. And so does John, and so does Jim, and so do the other key witnesses. And what was done to them was unconscionable by elements within officialdom. Be that as it may, I don't let fear run my life. I also have an awful lot of other completely outside interests. And if somebody came along and said, you're out of it, you can never work in this field again, I think enough of my own work. I don't believe in false modesty to think that the field would lose somebody of value, and I'd lose something that I'm passionate about doing, and I think I do fairly well. It's also a way of honoring my sister's memory, who got me into this. But I could dive back into the arts. I'd be a film historian. I work as a New York City tour guide. I would travel, but I live way out here in rural America. I mean, you've got to be reflexive, and you've got to have a life outside of this, a sense of humor, have courage to love and be loved.
I haven't heard
on a certain level.
I haven't heard you laugh so much lately. I used to make you laugh.
I bounce right out, but this week has been trying.
Yes, it
because
has.
the suggestions about Bud's career, poor Larry going through absolute hell, wondering how the hell anybody got hold of his tape. I'm furious in that sense about Charles Halt. I think what he did was very sneaky, and it was wrong, and he shouldn't have that material. I don't think it's a great reflection of character, and I don't think he's some monster Machiavellian figure. I think there's pressure on him. The same way that I don't hate Nick Pope, although I will never fully trust him again, and I don't think anybody in the field should. And all you need to do to learn a little bit more about that is read my book, Deliberate Deception, which you can go to the link on the Fade to Black page and download a 460-page book for free. There is pressure on people to do certain things. It doesn't make them evil, but it makes them destructive within the work, and I resent it. However, I can turn around and have a great laugh with friends, and tonight when I'm done with the show, I think I might just have a shot of single malt, put on a movie.
I'm right with you.
I'm right
with you.
Goof off for a while.
I might call you. We might drink vicariously
all
with
right.
each other. And I have a really great question that was just sent to us from one of our producers. It's long. I'm going to get to that in a second. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. This is our anniversary week. Tonight we were joined by Richard Dolan. That was pretty cool. We're talking to Peter Robbins. We're trying to put this Rendlesham thing to bed, and I will not rest. I will not rest till we do that. But I will. Just let me say this, Peter, or let me ask you this. You bring up Nick Pope, and I have seen some of the coolest pictures of you and Larry and Nick at Nick's parents' house, right? Or
Nick's apartment.
Nick's
Years
apartment.
ago in London. Oh
You
yeah, we had a
guys
lot of
are
fun together.
you guys are kicking back. You guys are laughing. You guys are having a good time. I
He's
believe
got a
you.
great sense of humor. We had a ball. When
And you
things
guys were reading E.T. porn out loud, and you know what and you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking
slightly
about.
altered state, I might add.
Right. And how do you guys go from that? Obviously, sitting on a couch on each other's laps, having the best of times.
Not on each other's laps.
Reading E.T. porn. And now here you guys are today. I mean, what do I got to do? Do I got to take you guys out somewhere? And do I got to involve some single malt?
Yeah.
Jimmy,
it's very simple. It really is. I made contact with Nick Pope for the first time in 1992, inquiring of Mr. N. Pope at the ministry at Whitehall on what was then characterized as the Woodbridge Lights incident. I was 5 years into the work on the book with Larry. I knew I was going to get a form letter, but I typed it out on my IBM Selectric typewriter, and that's how old I am and how old our story is. And within a week and a half, I got that letter back, and this is important backstory, so I'm glad you give me a minute or two to share it. It was a form letter. I filed it, but it ended with a sentence that stuck in my mind, which was, and in closing, good luck with your book. Now, 3 years later, we sold the book. We had finished it, and we sold it. And I pulled out the letter again and suggested to Larry that we contact Mr. N. Pope at the ministry. Who knows? If we send him a manuscript and he liked it, even though his name was not then known in America hardly, we'd have a blurb on the back from somebody with the ministry. Larry agreed, and we didn't kid ourselves. We knew that if we sent a copy to him, it would get passed around and whatever. By that point, also, Larry had met him through our mutual friend, Timothy Good. And coming into 97, when our book was coming out, within a week of when his first book was coming out, sight unseen, he invited me and he invited Larry to be his house guests at the beginning and the end of that summer's 15-city speaking tour. And Nick Pope worked very hard in many ways to help us because he believed in our book very strongly, to help it become a smash bestseller. And that smash bestseller caused some genuine embarrassment to Her Majesty's government, something that Nick Pope loves very much. And although our friendship continued on for many years, I think that kind of stuck in his craw, and I can understand it. He is nothing if not the most loyal person I have ever met to Her Majesty's government. And I have to say that I feel that whenever it was, a year and a half or longer ago, when Jim Penniston and John Burroughs approached him, and he was a good person to choose, I think, to co-author their book on their views on the Rendlesham Forest experience, he accepted. But he did something that ruptured our friendship and put me in a point where he will have to give a very real apology and explain himself for us to even have a chance at being friends again, which was he wove a thread of narrative throughout his part of the book, and I have to tell you, it is first rate, but it is textbook disinformation, all geared to leave one with the impression that whatever else you come away with when you read their book, there's this other alleged witness who co-wrote a book with this other guy, and although he's passionate and he's a good guy, he's disturbed, he's a loner, nobody's ever backed up his account, he has no real proof, he probably had the memories implanted, and it's all rather sympathetic and it's insidious. And I wrote a book about that book, and the title is Deliberate Deception, a case of disinformation in the UFO research community. And that title does not adhere itself to Jim or John. It is specifically Nick. I read it with shock, disappointment, ultimately some anger, and then simply realized I had to respond. And if I tried by, say, going on a show like yours and having an hour or two on the air, or did it in a series of Facebook posts, I would sound like an intelligent lunatic who is enraged. You can't answer.
Well, you do. You do anyway. So.
Well, thank you.
In
that case, I take it as a compliment.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Would you have looked at their Rendlesham book, which I think it's a fine book. I have it. But was it because of their treatment of Larry and your closeness to Larry and left at East Gate that caused you to respond, or not? I mean,
a very good question. First of all,
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am.
No. In fact, as you know, I encourage you and anybody else whose show I'm on to ask me the hardest questions you can. And that wasn't that hard. No. The thread of absolutely deliberate deception, and it is, and I charted it out on a spreadsheet. It's point after point after point after point after point where Nick takes information only available in original form in Left at Eastgate, and then either turns it in on itself, presents it in an incomplete way, or presents part of it and then does not present the actual evidence or the account backing it up, or the other witnesses who have confirmed what is being dismissed. It's insidious. And you know what? It's brilliant. It's a great piece of deceptive writing. Now, when you
say
Larry's
deceptive,
hero here, I'm coming to the aid of indirectly myself as well, because if he is this poor mind-controlled slob, or this lonely guy who made up his involvement, and I spent 9 years documenting it and backing it up in a book, what the hell am I doing in this field? I should be going back to school and learning another trade. So. No, I did it because wrong is wrong. And what Nick did was wrong and inaccurate and untruthful. And I'm very disappointed in him. And you know what? I like the guy. I wish him well. A long and happy life. I hope he makes lots of money. But he and Halt and Peniston refuse in any forum thus far to sit down with me in a civil, moderated discussion, moderator of their choice. I'll submit every question in advance. Any way they want to do it. Nick's too busy, and if it's an internet radio show, he makes it clear he doesn't do those. But he's not too busy. It's a matter of, it would be very embarrassing for any of them, because that's the quality of the research that I did, the confirmed findings. I did it like a legal case, and it is damning and hyper-specific. So you know what? I don't blame him, but I would love it if he would agree to sit down with me either in a moderated form on your show, or another show, or in a special event, or as part of a MUFON symposium, or the International UFO Congress, or whatever. Any terms that he sets, and I will behave myself. I will respect the situation that he's in. And again, I'm happy to submit every single question in advance with no gotchas and no pulled-out stops. I feel bad for the guy because he has to be evasive around this now. In fact, the last time that he kind of dismissed the book, it was as, well, a book about a book is a bit much, and that's a quote, as opposed to even daring to refer to any of the content. So,
well,
that's where it is.
Well, okay, and I'm going to play devil's advocate right here in front of everybody.
Okay,
couldn't everything that you just said about him, Jim, and John, and that tome, couldn't it be the same for you and Left at East Gate, in that we're dealing with memories that could have been implanted, B, there's could have been some drugs used by very bad people, 3-letter agencies, and this could be some crazy mind control experiment from the word go. And that includes Halt. I'm not going to exclude him from this. And so that's the way that one was written and the way that others, yours was written. The same argument could be said on both sides of the fence.
Well, a very good question, Mr. Devil, and I'll tell you why I don't think it washes. Number one, as far as implanted thoughts or confusion between a real memory and an implanted memory, that is a very tiny part of the specific information that I'm referring to that is completely distorted. For example, Nick talks about at one point Larry Warren's claiming that there was and it sounds so wild, it's actually a good one to try to take somebody down with, that Larry insisted that there was an experimental device on the base by the base flight line that he knew, because of my involvement, long and deep involvement in the work of Dr. Wilhelm Reich, was a Reich cloudbuster that can be used for weather modification, which when he first told me, I was furious because the last thing we needed was to bring this into the Rendlesham story.
Right.
And especially because it wasn't even involved at the same time, and it didn't have anything to do with the UFO events. And so in his brief treatment of that, he notes that Larry has reported this, that, some people say they work, that he gives a concise little history of weather modification, that it's only Larry's word for it, and goes on to the next thing. Well, that's a lie. There are two other witnesses who confirmed the same thing, both military witnesses, both Air Force sergeants, both stationed at RAF Bentwaters and Woodbridge in 82 and 83, who told us in person that they remembered the exact same device at the same location.
The one that was buried in the ground, correct?
No. It was a trailer-mounted thing. It looks roughly like a large anti-aircraft gun. And the last thing we need to do is go off on a tangent here. I will say, however, I have seen one of these in operation, and it was a day that changed my life, watching the complexion of the sky change in a matter of minutes as a trained operator used this device. But Nick makes the decision to bring up the information that is only available in Left at Eastgate, and he not only read the book, he read it in manuscript form before it came out, and then choose to suggest that Larry's the only one who claims to be the case when there were two other military witnesses included in Left at Eastgate. That is deliberate deception, and that pattern repeats throughout. That's why we're talking apples and oranges here. Also, I spent months on annotations. I think there are something like 350 footnotes throughout Left at Eastgate, 9 years of work. And if you think it's fun annotating, double-checking your facts, making sure the numbers are correct, especially if you're a numerically challenged dyslexic like me, think again. There's not a single annotation, not a single footnote, not a bibliography, not a reading list. You've got to take Nick's word for what he says in the book. And he says, no, the sources are in the context.
Right.
Well, a few of them are, some of them are not.
Yeah, he said the same thing to me. I asked him about the footnotes, and he said it's in the text. It's in the text.
Well, yeah, right. Well, read it carefully, and some of them aren't. And in two cases, things that should have been credited to Left at Eastgate, and nothing is credited to Left at Eastgate, are credited to erroneous sources.
Okay. Are you upset because he didn't give you footnotes?
No.
I'm just kidding.
Upset because he didn't tell the truth, and he didn't tell the truth in a manner specifically aimed at destroying my co-author and friend's credibility and my credibility as an investigative writer, and that's wrong. And I believe that there's pressure on him to do it. I think it's really a matter of whether or not he self-assigned himself the opportunity when Jim and John invited him to work on the book, and it's subtle. I mean, you're not going to see it jump out at you. That's why I hope that you'll read their book and then read my book, which is available at no cost.
I've read both, and you know that. By the way, I'll repost the links for Deception.
Good.
Not a problem. I'll get those back up there for you.
Cool.
But I think the greater damage would have been not mentioning Larry at all. And
well, if you're going to mention somebody and not tell the truth about them, as opposed to not mention them at all, I have to disagree with you.
Really? Well, okay. Well. Look, I'm just a show host. I'm just a show host. But I was glad that Larry was in there, and that's my point.
I wasn't glad that he was in there in totally untrue, mischaracterized, distorted fashion.
Okay.
If you're going to write about somebody, I mean, once again, it comes back to an issue of telling the truth. Nick does not tell the truth in the reference points that I am referring to.
Right.
And that is why I don't respect him anymore and why we have not been in contact since I read his book. Nick, if you're listening, call me anytime. Let's talk about this. But if you think I'm going to call somebody who has done this, and even when the book was out, before I had a copy, he and I had a brief exchange of emails, and one of the things I always like about Nick is he has a terrific sense of humor, and it can be very self-deprecating. I'm good at that too, where you have fun, or you let others have fun at your own expense. And one of our running things was, here I am in upstate New York, where it's not even winter yet, but in our mind it's been winter for a month. And there he is in Tucson, and it's 80 degrees and working in the garden. And he sent me an email just to remind me how lovely the weather was there that day, and this being, I guess early last March, when it was not lovely here. It was one of the things I really enjoyed about our banter. But thinking that he did that with that book already in print, waiting to be shipped, knowing that it was filled with this thread of deception about Larry, our work, and myself, that was a bit chilling. I think you sort of lose your right to make jokes with somebody when you have gone out of your way to do that to them, and you know it, and they don't at that time. Don't you, in a way?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, okay. I'll stand by you on that.
I mean, again, I hope your listeners will read my book. I did it for free. It has made it the most financially disastrous year I've had in my recent adult life. It's a joke. People who say that you're in this for the money, most of the work I've done this year has not been paying, and I don't have a pension. I'm one of those idiots that actually does this to try to make a living because I really believe in it. But I made that decision out of idealism and because I didn't want anybody to suggest, you wrote that because you're feeling left out and, their book is the center. And that has been insinuated that I am feeling a bit left out and they're the book of the moment, or as Nick has said, it's their turn. Well, of course it's their turn to tell their story if their book's out, but it does not mean it is his turn to use that opportunity to deceive the public with overt disinformation, textbook definition. Ladies and gentlemen, just read the two books and decide for yourself, and read Left at East Gate and decide for yourself. It's all we can ask. If people would, maybe there would be a groundswell of intelligent or better informed readers. And one thing about the new book, it has a 300-page appendices. It's a slim read. It's about 100 pages. But it gives you the largest Rendlesham-related database ever made public and likely ever to be made public. Larry and I are not making a cent on it. We could spend over a quarter century collecting this material. It's yours to become an authority on this case yourself. And let's do a show in a couple of months where some of you have read the book, write in, tell Jimmy you want to come back, bring on a number of the people involved, and having then read some of this stuff, let us take this dialogue further along. But, what it all comes down to, Jimmy, is something that we all, I think, want, which is not necessarily can't we all get along, although that would be wonderful. Can't we all sit down together and discuss this in a civil, respectful way with each other, acknowledging the problems at every level. That would be a coup, and it would be an important step, and it would really honor all of these people who have suffered directly and indirectly over these years.
Let me just comment on that. And I think I said this last night to Halt. I might have said this to Burroughs last night. Maybe I said it to them both. But I don't feel in my bones, and discussing this at length with all the parties involved, I don't think anybody has lied. I'm talking about the witnesses. I don't think anybody has lied. They are telling it just like they experience it, and that's what their memories are. And that's the funny thing about this. I don't think that anybody is accusing anybody of lying. I think it's more emotions that are in play here. I don't think.
With respect, Jimmy, one exception to that is Halt has repeatedly accused Larry of lying. Otherwise, I think you're right.
Well, yeah,
I know.
Yeah. Well, he said he wasn't there, but then in the same token, I said, well, without Larry, we have no Rendlesham. Well, yeah, you're right. Well, you can't have it both ways, right? Now, check this out. I'm going to read this to you. This just popped up in Twitter, and I've never really thought of this angle. I don't know if you ever have either, or anybody else. And this comes from Steve from Bluefield. And he says, wow, this is heavy. Okay. Ask him to speak about the authenticity of Halt's tape. It's just odd that Halt got to keep the tape after his superiors heard it. Wow.
I'm happy to address that. Number one, that was not an official tape. Mr. Halt, and I know the feeling because I walked around with an audio cassette recorder in each pocket for years in the first years we worked in analog days. He went out into that forest that night as a skeptic. He wanted a recording of the event. I only respect him for it. There is no question about the authenticity of the tape. All five men with him, will confirm that. It's a fair question, but the answer is absolutely. That is an authentic tape of a real experience recorded by Charles Halt under the conditions stated in the Rendlesham Forest.
No question.
With those five voices in the background of real people.
No question, but that's not my point.
Oh.
My point is, there's no question that's an authentic tape. We've all heard it, man. It still puts chills down my spine when I listen to it. It's crazy. But why would they let that tape go?
They didn't,
that's the question. Why would they let him keep the tape?
Let me tell you what I understand, and I am as sure as I can be that this is the story. They really didn't. This is what happened. Mr. Halt made the tape. He made, and I'm sorry, I just closed that file because I actually have it written all out. A superior asked for a copy. That copy was copied by another officer who had a little fun playing it at cocktail parties for other personnel. Halt not there and taking a little ribbing because of it. Ultimately, a copy made its way to a British researcher who turned around and sold it to a Japanese producer for Nippon Television. His Japanese name, I think I'm pronouncing it right, is Yunichi Yaoi. He's called Jimmy Yaoi. Now, in 1984, a year after Larry Warren became a public figure in this work, he was invited. And Larry, if I'm getting this wrong, shoot me now. To speak in Tokyo. Ironically, I was invited to speak on Rendlesham 20 years to the month later in 84. And he did, and made real waves there. And when Jimmy brought him back to the airport, he gave him a copy of the tape. When Larry Warren returned to America, he gave a copy to Larry Fawcett, who, again, was the guy he had worked with to put the FOIA together that resulted in the release of the Halt document, which, of course, was something of a problem for Charles Halt. But the way that the tape and the document came into the public realm was indirectly, Larry Warren was the linchpin in both cases. So it wasn't managed in terms of it being commandeered by the military. It was considered, I think, a curiosity and a bit of a joke. It was not, secured and put in the vault, and everybody in the five-man party with the colonel sworn to secrecy.
Bob Salas just tweeted, and it's public, Bob, so I'm going to read it right now.
Oh, good.
He just says, Peter's doing an outstanding job telling it as it is. Halt still has much to answer for. Pope's deliberate deception. And so Bob's listening. Hey, Bob, how you doing? I just tweeted him back. Great to hear from you.
There's a guy worthy of all our respect. What he's been through, none of us can imagine.
You know what's funny? When Bob was on the show, he may not even remember. It was about a year ago. And that we didn't do that show live. Bob had something to do in the evening, so I taped it, and we did it in the morning. And I do not have a copy of that show, and it was so much fun. It was so great and everything, but it's this is where it's gone. It's just gone. I don't have a copy of it, and just totally bummed out about that. We got to get Bob on the show. We got to get him back.
Yeah, he'd be a great guest. In fact, I was reminded of that just a few weeks ago when he and I and Rich Dolan were all speaking at the International UFO Congress in Brazil, which was a wonderful experience on the side. And Rich and I especially had a great time together as roommates at this funky hotel. But Bob, once again, did an absolutely masterful, compelling presentation, not just about the world-famous UFO incident that he was in, the Malmstrom Air Force Base nuke UFO incident, but on the broader picture, too. He's not just a great guy, but he's a great man in my book any day.
Yeah, you want me to tell you how I felt during that interview? He's so smart. He's right. Bob Salas is so smart and so educated, right? Yeah. And I was
very well spoken.
I was so intimidated. Not intimidated. That's not the right word, but maybe in some context. But he's just so smart, and I was constantly thinking about my speech. I was so concerned about my English. I was just so I was so wrapped up in the moment, and it's the truth, man. He's so great, and he's so well spoken, and he's got all the education and everything behind him, and it just I was maybe intimidated is the right word, but I was constantly thinking about in my frontal lobe about my speech. That's what I remember about that. I don't know. I'm glad that that I've lost those. I've lost those files because I don't know if I can go back and listen to it, because I know that's exactly what I was thinking about the whole time. I was so excited and I was so prepared, and I've looked up to him for so many years, and we sit down to do the interview, and I couldn't help myself but constantly think about how I was speaking. And you know what? If he remembers, it was a long time ago, but if he ever remembers that, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. He had me, man. He had me. He had me good. Bob, we got to get you back on the show. And,
by all means.
He lives right down the street. He's right here.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah. Well, not down the street, but we're Southern California in general.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, what a crazy evening. Now this is now let's have some fun for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm gonna let's open up the phone lines 323-825-5045. Hey Bob, call in 323-825-5045. And okay, let's just that didn't take long. Normally it's a 10-second delay. Let's go to the first call. Hey Steve, how are you tonight? Say hi.
What's going on, gentlemen?
Say hi to Peter Robbins.
Peter Robbins, how are you, sir?
Good. And how are you, Steve?
Just fine, sir. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the question that Jimmy had asked about the tape. And
About
I
Mr.
just
Halt's
listened to the re-recording. I had a tape of last night and listened to what Halt said.
Mm-hmm.
And last night, Halt had said that he had turned the tape over and that it was sent and listened to and a group of his superiors listened to the tape, and it was returned to him.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And my question, and that's what he said last night. And that, and my problem with it is how does a tape, you're taking soldiers and you're drugging them up and interviewing them, and how does a tape of the whole event happen to slip through, and then years later mysteriously just pop out into the open?
Well, actually, Steve, it's a tape of about 15 minutes of one incident in a series of events over the course of 3 nights. So it's not quite what you think it is. It is authentic, but again,
well, I don't doubt that the tape is authentic.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is
I doubt that the whole tape has there things been taken away from the tape that we don't know about.
Now I got your question. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Mr. Halt, as I understand, I've heard 2 accounts of this, and this is a question for him, of course. One, that it is a 15 or so minute recording, and then his battery started to go whatever, or that it is a 15 or 16 minute segment from several hours of recording that evening. Now, I'm not in a position to tell you that. What I can tell you is that Halt relates that a copy of the tape he made for Ted Conrad, who was the base commander. Another officer, Sam Morgan, found the tape and started playing it at cocktail parties and dinner parties, thought it was amusing. UK solicitor, barrister, lawyer, whatever you call it, Harry Harris, who is also a UFO researcher, asked Morgan for a copy of the tape, and Morgan gave it to him. He turned around, sold it on his own to Junichi Yaoi, the Nippon television producer, kept the money, and Jimmy Yaoi gave a copy to Larry Warren, who gave a copy to Larry Fawcett, who then made it public. That's the genesis of how the tape got out. But as far as the specifics of whether or not it's a segment of that event or that's all he recorded before the battery started to go, that's a question for Charles Halt to answer, not me.
How's that?
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Bet.
Jimmy, happy 1st anniversary, brother.
Thank you so much, Steve. Have a good night, man. Be safe.
Thanks for the time, brother.
You got it, man.
Bet.
Yeah, now I understand his question. And
good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And also, I think I asked Charles last night, or maybe I did it off of the air, about how many tapes there are. I had heard so many things over the years, like we all have, how many tapes are out there. He says there's just 2. And that's it. And I asked him about the length. He said, that's pretty much it. Everything that's there is there. I don't know. Why? Okay. I'm going to ask you like this.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to Chuck,
mm-hmm.
He was the deputy base commander. He was the boss. Like he said last night on the show, he knew what was being prepared in the cafeteria. And I don't discount that for a second. I know that absolutely is true. But if you're going to say that, you're in control of the schools, the elementary school, the high school, this and that. You were the principal. You were you were head of the cafeteria. You walked the base every single day. Well, then don't you know everything also about this case? That's the thing. Don't you then? You can't say that you know everything about Rendlesham. And I'm talking about, were there underground facilities there? Was there HARP controls there? Were there nuclear weapons on the base? You were the deputy base commander. You were, in effect, the base commander. So if
So
you're
it
gonna,
seems.
so right. So if you're going to say that to me, which I believe,
Yeah.
then don't you also know everything about this case? You know about the debriefings. You know what was happening to the soldiers under your command. You knew everything about the case. Everything about the case. And if you did know everything about the case, then therefore you are not telling us everything that you know. Isn't that just something that we can deduce here?
Well, here's the way I see it. Mr. Halt is, for me, as complex a player as we have here. He is both a witness and a member of the establishment. He is a player, and in a way, he's a victim. Remember, again, he, on a certain level, is an early casualty of this whole story. If Larry Warren had not connected up with Larry Fawcett in 1982 and given him all that he could remember, which Fawcett and company then wrote up into a FOIA, which resulted in the release of the Halt document, Charles Halt's military career and his life might have been very different. Let's remember that at the time of the events, Jimmy, he was a lieutenant colonel, respected officer, Vietnam veteran, I think non-combatant, and a career, officer. When he retired, as I recall, 12 years later, he was a colonel. Now, I know that officers tend to be more fast-tracked up the ladder of promotion if they're pilots, and he was not. But I have it on good authority from a number of people that I know, including somebody I was just back and forth with a few minutes ago who has worked in Pentagon for decades, that 12 years and going from a lieutenant colonel to a colonel, having been in that post of equivalent of a base commander, deputy base commander, for an incredibly important secured NATO base at that point in the Cold War, with all of the responsibilities that were on his shoulders, which were more than you or I could even imagine, that hurt his career. When we met with Mr. Halt in Washington more than 20 years ago and sat down with him in a food court in, ironically, a shopping mall directly across the street from the Pentagon called Pentagon City. And all of this is, recorded and available in transcribed form and left at East Gate. Some of the things that he related to us, my heart went out to the guy in that he described the point where he woke up one morning in his home in Virginia, and there was a Nippon film crew on his front lawn. Another time that a couple of, researchers, so to say, in so many words, not in a life-threatening way, but they got his teenage son drunk and, kind of commandeered him, put a covering over his head and made him testify into a recorder while he was being filmed, something else. People really, this is not fun stuff. And he had every reason to be angry at Larry Warren because of it. I think for those of us that try to imagine what it's like to be at the center of a kind of storm like this, I don't know if we have that good of imagination. And I say it as somebody that's been doing this work for over 35 years, that's been involved directly or indirectly in looking into this series of events for more than a quarter of a century, and who's somebody that does it professionally and who has had my own share of stress-related moments, comparing what I've gone through, as a UFO-related investigative writer to the pressures of a career military officer at the height of the Cold War running a highly secured NATO base with backstories of a nuclear presence when the treaty with the UK disallowed them, and I think that is still the case, at the same time as there is the series of UFO incursions we can't even imagine. And for that, I can only respect Mr. Halt. His continuing efforts to discredit, demean, minimize, dismiss the definite involvement, and I mean, again, just read either Lefty's Escape or Deliberate Deception, and you will see scientifically confirming evidence. In fact, let me lay it out for you in 90 seconds. The soil on the exact spot, and I don't mean the almost exact spot, the exact spot where Larry's event took place, and I was with him when he returned there for the very first time in 8 years and 2 months. I returned to that spot repeatedly, and even 10 years after the event, when I drew the samples, and I came back into JFK Airport with almost 20 pounds of dirt in my bag in large laboratory containers, and that was a hell of a story of what I went through at security with my dirt. But the sand in the soil had melted. It was in an interim form of glass. And this, again, in every case, is compared to control samples taken from, 100, 200 yards out in the field. The tiny, in this case, the soil had like little sand-sized grains of metallic particles. It was absolutely normal in the control samples. It was more than 4 times the amount in the affected sample, which our laboratory analyst, a scientist who is a real person, his name is Matthew Moniz. He is still working for in this case, another distinguished laboratory in Massachusetts right now. And hi, Matt. He is absolutely rock solid. Seed germination tests that were, anyway, it suggested only a very powerful electromagnetic effect had taken place there.
And I'm going to jump in because you said only 90 seconds. I would like to.
I'll just
hold on. Hi, say hi to Peter Robbins.
Hi, Peter and Jimmy. This is Chase.
I know that voice, and I was just about to secretly email you, but I'm busted.
Well, I was trying to get you to tell the guys that you needed keys to the sandbox where the Fader nuts hang out. But I really, called in with something serious, and that is one of the things as a fellow investigator out here that I learned from you and cherish and try to exemplify in everything I do is when you take a case and you rely on the credibility of a witness, we're asking them to give us everything, to be honest as possible. And then we establish them as credible. We don't abandon our witnesses because there's a little drama later. And you're standing behind your work, you're standing behind your research, and you're not abandoning your witness no matter what's going on in his personal life. This case was well documented, handled better than most I've ever seen, and I just really want to thank you because that's a kind of a lesson we can take off of this that I haven't heard yet. And what is the responsibilities as investigators we have when it comes to our witnesses, especially when others want to discredit them?
Yeah. You learned that lesson well, my friend. You got to try to take the high road, and when you need to fight, fight hard, but fight fair. And there's just a few simple rules, and you are following. It's one of the reasons that I love you as a friend, and I respect the growth that I have seen you make as an investigator. You set a model for so many other people at this point, and I'm just honored and flattered that you feel that way.
Well, it's such an important lesson. We have to maintain that, the integrity and credibility in our work. We have to stand on it. And when it comes under attack, I know it's easy for people to say it's a pissing contest, they're peeing on their bushes, whatever, or your feelings are hurt because someone said something bad, but it's bigger than that. It's our work, and you've had decades, and this is your witness that you've proven time after time after time again that he's telling the truth. You have to defend your witnesses, especially on such a high profile. So thank you so much. And, I just wanted to call in and say that and, sneak in for another shot because I love Jimmy Church's show and all my fellow Fader nuts.
Thank you, Chase.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Happy holidays, Chase.
Thank you. Yeah,
Happy
Merry
holidays.
Christmas, sweetie.
Bye-bye. And you know what, though? She raises a fantastic, to-the-point point. One little crack in the foundation, man, and it all crumbles. And you have stood by not only Larry, but your book and your facts and everything else. You've said this to me so many times. Jimmy, I just chase the facts. I just chase the facts. That's what I do, Jimmy. I just deal with the facts. But one little crack in the foundation, there are enough people out there that are just waiting for that, and they'll jump on it, and the house of cards crumbles.
Yeah. Again, I think part of the best we can do is be very careful not to superimpose your longings, your beliefs, your wishes on data and declare it empirical. It's actually driven people to distraction with me occasionally because I really am pretty hyper about parsing what I can prove in court. I've got the evidence, what I believe is the truth but can't do that, what I suspect, what I fear, what I long for. Say it like it is, but don't try to pass it off as something else. The thing I've learned more directly in all of the years I've been in this work is how little any of us really, really know. I know that there are a lot of people who say they know a lot, and when people start to, personal pet peeve of mine is when people start to get into numbers. And a favorite example, and that's the way it is, some years back, Dr. Stephen Greer declared that there were, I think, 68 alien races visiting the Earth. And I just went through the ceiling. It is, I don't care who you are. I don't care who you know. I don't care what your connections are. You could literally be the President of the United States, the Queen of England, the head of the NSA, MI6, the head of the mob, and the supreme rulers of 14 alien races, and you could not know that number as a precise, confirmed, empirical fact. It's simply impossible. So, the great Judge Judy, who I think makes about $37 million a year in her franchises, I live by one of her quotes, which is, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. And now you will.
Yeah, right. Oh, hey, check this out. I need to get this in, and we'll leave on this note. This is a question from Renee, one of our producers here. Mm-hmm. She says, I'm asking this question. This is long, so just stay with me. Sure. I'm asking this question because you worked with Bud Hopkins. Yeah. When I met him at a speaking engagement in San Diego in the 1980s, he told the audience that the many firsthand accounts of abductions weighed on him heavily. Yes. Hopkins said that he was receiving a consistently increasing number of letters from abductees around the world detailing some horrendous experiences. He spoke about his own feelings of helplessness reading all of these on a daily basis and said he wanted to find out why things happen. He also mentioned his practice of holding back certain information from the public so he could corroborate common abduction elements in his research. I noticed, based on the Q&A session, that about 1/3 of the audience were neutral on non-experiencers like myself. About 1/3 had very positive contact and spoke of aliens as our space brothers, while about 1/3 had abduction procedures that gave them nightmares and might have scarred them for life. I'll never forget Bud's expression of distress at something that appeared to be harming so many people for reasons unknown. My question is, as time went by and the phenomenon of contact became better understood, did Bud ever come to think of human ET contact as anything positive?
Boy, Renee, you are a light in the wilderness. That is one of the most thoughtful, important, and articulated questions. And please understand, I answer this question from the point of view of somebody who met Bud Hopkins in 1976, a year after I got involved, a year after he got involved in the work, 5 years before he published his first book. We were friends for more than half my life, and close colleagues for something close to 15, 18 years, as well as friends, I answered personally thousands of those letters that you just referred to, all by hand. Also, I took hundreds of phone calls, and I was with him at times that he was terribly down about these things. And let me make a point of clarification here so people don't misunderstand. When you referred to the information withheld, it sounds like, oh, what's he holding back and repressing? Well, one of the extraordinary things about the abduction phenomena was not just similar, reports of similar experiences. And the fact is that the great majority of people that came to Bud were not saying the aliens are evil. They're saying, I've been traumatized. And the Judeo-Christian tradition, the great Western philosophies, have not prepared us for this. Of course, there are people that have positive experiences, but the reports overwhelmingly, and it was amazing over the years, handling hundreds and hundreds of letters, sometimes in a month if there was some big thing happening, but thousands over the years, to see the handwritten details and realize, oh my God, they just described a very specific feeling that they had at this moment. They described the leg on the table that they were being examined in thusly. They described that instrument that is coming at them with that little curve just at that point above where they insert it. They are giving me the exact same phrase that is put in their head right before they say the other phrase. They have a pathological fear of a certain phenomena. Okay, let's say, and this is not one, but when I'm making breakfast in the morning, if somebody's making eggs sunny side up and I look in the pan and I see the two yolks, I pass out, I get so scared. What we did over the years was we separated out some of these extraordinarily consistent details that came in year after year from every corner of the country, from every corner of the world, and set up a database, because it allowed us, we could say, yes, these are signs that you may have had these experiences beside the overt memory or somebody witnessing it in some way. But toward the end of his life, he slowed down. I came in as a volunteer, kind of where I started 35 years earlier, and when I'd come in for the day. I'd do things around the house. I'd answer mail. We'd have conversation, cup of coffee, and right up to the end, he insisted on having at least, till almost the end, a little bit of Cutty Sark. That was his brand of scotch. I was more snooty and usually had something more expensive, which he didn't like. But he was not happy about what he was seeing. Essentially, that there is this thing going on where these hybrids seem to be being created. Where are they? What's going on? What's it all leading to? Like any inquiring mind, and Bud has one of the most ferociously curious intellects I have ever encountered in my life. Most people don't know it, but he was incredibly well-read in the classics. His knowledge of art history was superb, and as somebody that still is immersed on a certain level in the world of the visual arts, I appreciated it deeply. He read the New York Times every day, the New York Review of Books. He was a grand historian in a number of areas, but as far as the UFO abduction phenomena was concerned, he was concerned. He did realize, and I think his friendship with John Mack, even though they disagreed on certain aspects of things, these two guys adored each other as human beings. They were the most engaging conversationalists, and John was overtly, had already rejected the Western model. His eyes had turned east years before he got involved in the abduction phenomena. He was looking for positive transcendences in these experiences and making no bones about it. Bud was, I think, doing his best to report and chronicle the feelings and details of experiences that people who approached him had. Now, one can argue that as Bud Hopkins became Bud Hopkins, and became known as somebody who wrote about events that had happened to people that were not pleasant. I think it's a natural thing that as he became better known, people seeked him out who were troubled by their memories.
There's another thing.
They'd seek out Leo Sprinkle, who was more, a transcendent, positive guy, if they were looking for, somebody to help them with the wonderful, transcendent things that they remembered happening.
I never met Bud, but there's one thing I will say that through video and his writings and so forth, there's one thing about Bud that I wish I would have met him. He was not afraid to call BS.
No, he wasn't.
Ooh, no. Because he was so cautious about the way that everything was perceived from the outside. Yeah. And he would call BS on anybody because he didn't want things clouded. He didn't want reputations hurt. He didn't want he wanted everything to be up and up, straightforward. I don't want to call him a Boy Scout because I never met him. But
fully followed the Western model. He was a pragmatist and he was a humanist. He really genuinely cared about these people who were, to put it mildly, extremely troubled about their experiences. I was privileged to attend most of the support group meetings he ever held, and they were pioneering. They went from, a room with 12 people to several groups that were so large they became unmanageable and we had to give it up. He also, I think he was able to survive the tremendous stress that would have obsessed or institutionalized somebody with less wits about them, because he never gave up painting. It was his ultimate passion. He kept coming back to it. He also loved to travel. He enjoyed people. He enjoyed the wonderful city that we lived in, and he had a wicked sense of humor.
We have 45 seconds, Peter. 45. That's it. 45 seconds.
Come back and do a show about Bud.
I will do that in a second. You know that.
I'd love to.
Okay.
When we can fill it up, I've got millions of stories.
30 seconds, really quick. What are you doing right now? You just taking a break for the holidays?
I've got a couple of weeks. I'm going to head into the city probably the end of the month, maybe see a New Year's there. Otherwise, so looking forward to the mundane things of cleaning the house tomorrow, starting to do my Christmas cards a week late, cook for my family, see my dear niece and nephew, who I love like they were my own kids, which I probably the closest I will get, who I'll be seeing my niece tomorrow, my nephew in a few days. Dave and Rebecca, I'm crazy about you. See you soon. And just thank all the forces that be that I am as lucky as I am. Stay at a special time of year.
Stay with me. You get to hear me read credits. Stay with me, Peter.
You got it.
Thank you, Peter Robbins. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producer, Drita Kamarian. Shows produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Thanks to LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Viteau, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Method. Music by Doug Aldridge. Intro by SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, big anniversary special with Steve Murillo and Alex Mistretta live in the studio. Peter Robbins, say goodnight to everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Jimmy.
You got it, Peter. Thank you so much. I'll see everybody tomorrow. Be safe. See ya.